us.
We are live. It
The stream is live.
People know, if they know that we were recording, they know that as of 9 minutes ago. But so it is amazing if anybody made it here. We are once again sorry. Well, maybe not. I speak only for me. Perhaps nobody else is sorry. But also nobody else is at fault.
Quinn and I are always sorry. It's like part of our culture.
Genetic.
Are we all in Canada? I guess we are.
Yeah, if you. I guess we are. Once again, this is the second time that's happened.
Nice.
And once we all started the day in Canada, but you were not in Canada by the time we recorded.
Oh, true. Right. Yes. All right. Well, this is the big 1977 episode. So
nothing happened and skip that year.
Yeah, I don't. That seems like
It's a dud.
kind of a non-event, really.
I was actually thinking a little bit about 1978, because there are other people that we, were going to be here and couldn't be here, and they might have 1977 things to say. But I think 1977 was a bigger year than 1978.
Maybe there was some computer that came out in 78, and it was just like, oh, nobody remembers me.
Yeah.
It's a tough act to follow, 77.
Yeah. Okay, let me make an attempt here to get my screen sharing set as well with my window of many tabs.
I guess it is on point that we have a trinity of podcasters to discuss 1977.
Yes, true. I wonder to what extent I'm going to wind up, cutting in the stuff that we waste here in the pre-roll.
Oh, this is gold.
It's all gold. It's all gold. What? Waste.
Okay.
I should just be recorded 24/7.
Yeah.
My lawyer disagrees.
Yeah, should you?
Right. All right.
According to my ankle monitor.
Yes, I agree. Your location should be monitored at all times by the state. Yes,
Right.
on that we agree.
Yes, Quinn, I know. 500 yards. Blah, blah, blah. You don't have to keep reminding me.
You didn't even do anything. It was just precautionary.
Just
It's just a
but I understood.
preemptive restraining order.
It's like, yeah, it's fair. I get it. I get it.
This will be needed someday.
Yeah. It's,
All right. It's June 23rd, 2024, and welcome to episode 277 of the Retrocomputing Roundtable. The RCR is a podcast about retro computer news, nostalgia, collecting, and holy trinities, I guess.
Holy trinities,
today.
Batman.
Holy, right. I was planning to say that at some point, and then I forgot, but somebody did, so that's good. Anyway, I'm Paul Hagstrom near Montreal today, and I am joined by two other retrocomputing enthusiasts. The first of whom is Quinn. The first of which, I don't know. The first is Quinn Dunkey in rural British Columbia. How are you?
hello, I'm excellent. Well, the weather is beautiful right now. Unfortunately, I'm not doing great. I'm living with a rotator cuff injury. F minus, do not recommend. Turns out shoulders are super complicated, and if any tiny thing goes wrong in there, your life is miserable for several months, and it turns out you can't do anything. But other than that, I'm doing great. And officially, I injured it diving from the back of a moving vehicle to save a toddler from a train. What actually happened is that I'm middle-aged and I slept on it weird, and now it's injured because getting old is stupid. Don't do it.
Might be better than the alternative, but yes.
True, that's true. Yeah, given the alternatives, yeah, I'll take getting old.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. And in better news, we are also joined by Carrington Manston in Toronto. How are you?
I am better news.
For certain very limited definitions of better.
A better and news and joined and Carrington. I'm doing great.
Carrington Vanston, better than a rotator cuff injury since
Exactly.
1975.
Yeah. It is interesting that we're all in Canada at this point for some reason. So
Eventually,
welcome to episode 277, eh?
Yeah, and spanning Canada, we got kind of a trinity of the country covered at the moment.
True. Yeah, it was.
East Coast wonders where the representation is.
That's true. Yeah, PEI just flipped their table in frustration.
It's been quite hot here the last couple of days, but it's
Here too.
so it makes it seem nicer now, I suppose. But anyway, and of course, when people listen to this on the feed and they say, "But it's winter in North America," what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I
We
think
recorded
this
this back before the robots took over.
that's right. Anyway, okay, so we have been tracking the sort of years of computing history with our episode numbers. We have reached episode 277. All of us had been kind of waiting to reach episode 277, since that was when all of our sort of like personal computers came into being. But yeah, so that's I guess what we're gonna talk about this time. I don't know.
Skip it.
Yeah, I don't know how far we're gonna get in all the different things. There's the sort of obvious trinity that we can talk about. There's a couple other things. Maybe we can talk about those first and then get into the others. But one thing I was not myself super conscious of was the fact that the 2600 is also in this year. So
Yeah, I guess
Atari
it
had
was,
an entry.
Yeah. I keep thinking it was. I always think of it being 76, but I guess it was 77, wasn't it? Huh.
Yeah, at least this is the claim on the source of all reliable knowledge.
I believe it.
But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so Atari 2600. I don't think I encountered it that early, but
No,
I
yeah,
had
I
one,
think
but not that early.
Yeah, I never owned one, but I think maybe 81, 82 would have been the first time I actually saw one. Maybe earlier, maybe 80, but it was one of those things that, everybody had one, but we never did. So I would always play it at other people's houses. Interestingly, my mature adult middle-aged aunt and uncle had one. They were kind of gadget people, and so they had one. And so I actually would go play it at their house. That was where I first encountered Atari Pac-Man, which I thought was fantastic, and the industry takes great joy in dunking on, which I think is totally unfair. But
Pac-Man.
It was quite a technical feat to implement Pac-Man on the 2600, but people were not impressed with the port of it, I guess.
Yeah.
But for the record, Todd Fry, ex-personal friend of mine, only ex because I haven't seen him in many years, but not that he did anything wrong. Very nice guy. So
very nice, and also some major achievements. Like so, ignore that one even, and there's still the things accomplished. So,
yeah, he's a good guy.
So this was the author of the Pac-Man on the 2600.
Yes,
what I'm deducing.
Yeah, and he was one of those like golden age Atari people like Rob Zadibble and Howard Scott Warshaw, who were there when it was all crazy, when they were like sitting in hot tubs and smoking weed in the offices, and like when it was at maximum cray. And Todd reportedly made so much money on Atari Pac-Man that he was just getting like 6-figure royalty checks like weekly. Mm-hmm. And he bought a sports car. I think it was a Jaguar or something, and it broke down. And so he just abandoned it on the side of the road and took a taxi back to the dealership and bought another one. It's one of the famous stories from that time. Who knows if they're all true, but they're good stories nonetheless.
Sure.
I think there was actually a much more modern rendition of Pac-Man created for the 2600 that actually looks pretty real.
Yeah, there is a retro remake of it that has been done that was actually quite a bit better. So yeah, with the benefit of all the knowledge we have of the system now and modern development tools and so on, better Pac-Mans are possible. Pac-Men are possible. Yes, better Pac-Men are possible. But
and because we'll probably get some pedantic people, because those are our people. Almost certainly the 2600 wasn't released. It was the VCS later named.
Yes, fair. Yes, it was originally the VCS.
Yeah, true. When I went to look up Atari VCS, it kept wanting to take me to the 2021 one.
Right, that's a problem. That's a big problem. They re-released that nostalgia console, and they named it VCS again. And so that's just ruined Google searches for that whole category of knowledge. Yeah, I hate it when they do that. Right. Same with Commodore 64. Like there's so many Commodore 64 re-release systems now that it's really hard to find actual Commodore information because Google is just contaminated with the Mini and the Maxi and the re-release of the Mini and the joystick one, and it's terrible.
Yes. All right. Let's see. So what else? We another thing that seems to have a 1977 date is X modem.
Oh, did not know that either.
I did not know that. Okay.
That's got to be.
That was around forever.
Yeah, add that to the list of things that are always older than you think they are. Holy cow! Because I don't know about you folks, but I would not have encountered X modem until like the mid 80s, maybe.
Mid 80s, totally. Yep.
Yeah, like 2400 BPS kind of modem era BBS stuff. But then it didn't last very long. I remember when I got into BBS's, X modem was already on its way out. Like it was the old one, and like Y modem was the cool one, and then Z modem was just starting to come in, and Z modem was like really like that was the good. Yeah, and Y modem was pretty good too. But yeah.
Yeah, I sort of feel like Y modem didn't really have much of a day. I mean,
it got replaced pretty quickly.
Yeah,
pretty quickly.
For me, Z modem was the thing, but X modem for a while, but Y modem was just the one that came between.
Yeah, it was late enough that X modem, like when you saw BBS that only supported X modem, you're like, oh, great. This is going to take twice as long to download. It takes
so long. Exactly.
Yeah. I wonder why it's actually called that. Because it doesn't
ask. Yeah, I don't know.
Because it seems like, X modem is the one that had the creativity. Everybody else is like, well, all right, we're going to be X modem plus one.
Yeah, it's like every GNU thing, right? It's like it's Elm and then it's Pine, because like Elm stood for electronic mail, and then it's Pine, and then it's Spruce or whatever. Then they start making goofy pun names following that pattern. Yeah, it seems like one of those. I guess for people who don't know, these were protocols for modems.
We should say, right? Yes.
Yeah, just assume protocols. Everybody listening knows what we're talking about. But yeah, X modem was a protocol for connecting to BBSs and things that, or for transferring files. That initially was it just an encoding, and then like Y modem added like compression or something. I don't know. I feel like they advanced through and then Z modem had like really good compression and all so the downloads got faster and faster as these protocols improved, even though your modem speed might be the same. And I think Z modem added restartability, which was a big thing. If your download got interrupted, you could reconnect and resume your download, which was huge on BBSs because dial-up modems were so fragile. Like somebody picks up the phone or an airplane flies over the telephone switch or whatever. Yeah, and it disconnects you, and then it's just hours and hours wasted of download time, which that was worst.
Yeah, I think X modem wasn't compressed and had a sort of a fixed small packet size. But I mean, so that's what it was. It would transmit something. I think it was capable of saying, "Did you get it? No, I'll send it again."
Right. Yeah.
But that's about it.
That's probably why it was invented, was to make reliable like duplex communication so that you knew. Yeah. Because the connections weren't very good. Like if you're just downloading text off of BBS, it doesn't matter if a few bits get missed here and there, because whatever, get a typo in a screen of text, doesn't matter. But of course, for file downloading, that's a big deal.
If it's describing X modem and then the typo was that it became Y modem, maybe that was the idea.
Yeah, maybe that's where it comes from. Yeah. When I was downloading files, I used to go and put a piece of tape over all of the phone cradles in the house so that nobody else would like accidentally pick up the phone, because they don't know you've been on the phone for 6 hours and you've got 1 hour left on this download, and so they just pick up the phone and they hear a weird noise and I scream from upstairs.
Weird noises everywhere.
Yeah, then they know what happened.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I seem to remember about Y modem was the addition of batch. You could say, I want this whole group of files.
Yes, that's true.
On vacation for a week.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'll go away and hope.
Yeah. And then one of them added compression. I feel like it was Y modem that added that, and I think Z modem added the restarting, but I'm not positive about
that. Somewhere along the line, and it may have been, I'll keep saying Z modem. I think the CRC, like error correction came into play as well.
Yeah.
Which I guess, it was, if it was always going to have error correction, I don't know. I guess that added sort of an extra level of safety, because just the checksum is easily fooled.
Right. Yeah.
Like 2 errors can solve your checksum problem.
Yeah.
So you had at least an odd number of errors, so we need to send it again. All right. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's good enough. Also, another thing that was in that list was FAT, the disk allocation
File
tracking.
allocation table. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still around to this day. So many
Yeah.
thumb drives.
Yeah. So whatever. I mean, it had a big impact, but yeah. So I guess maybe we can just talk about the computers.
So no, that's done. That was 1977, right? Yeah.
Right, that's it.
X
Oh,
modem.
and VAX.
VAX.
It looks like VAX was.
Yeah.
was
Oh, VAX. Yes, we didn't
get
mention
into
VAX.
Unix versus VMS argument
yeah.
as is required.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that we all think about with 1977 is the introduction of
Star Wars.
the Star Wars. Yes, the introduction of Darth Vader into our lives, and the seeming romance between Luke and Leia.
What?
Yeah, which
No spoilers.
did not age well, turns out. That was super creepy all along. Who knew?
Right. Yeah, but anyway, right. So I mean, I think we all are known to, and sometimes it's sometimes objected to, that we all have experience with one of those three. But maybe we can talk a little
unbiased.
bit about the others, just a little bit.
Famously unbiased.
Well, so we're
Yes.
burying the lead here. So, of course, 1977 was the year of the holy trinity of home computer releases, which was the TRS-80 Model 1, the PET, and the Apple II.
Yep, the Commodore PET, in fact.
Commodore PET, yes.
Hard to say that name.
To give.
Yeah.
Unbiased.
So yeah, arguably the year that started the home computer revolution. I think it's hard to even argue against that.
And
frankly.
changed the heck out of all our lives, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because while there were home computers prior to that, there were none that really got established as mainstream or made a mark on the gestalt quite like those three did. And it seemed like there was a moment there where everybody had one of those three. Really, until the Commodore 64 came along, every person in every school who knew anything about computers had one of those three things.
Yeah. So the one I had eventually, of course, I interacted with this in school and later, but I never had a friend who had a pet. So I never used a pet in the day. I think Carrington, you said you
I did at
some
school.
point, right?
Yeah, there was a pet at school in a little computer room, but that was
Yeah.
I didn't have any friends with pets.
Yeah, ours was the same. Where in junior high school, that would have been, we had a pet. We had a couple of classrooms that had a pet in the back. It seemed like the pattern for a lot of schools, maybe yours was the same, was they bought like a half dozen pets in 77 or 78, and then like 79, 80, then they just went all in on Apple II after that. But they initially bought a bunch of pets, or a handful of pets. So there was a couple of them in the school. So yeah, you could play with them when your quizzes were done or whatever. The teacher would let you go sit in the back of the room and play with the pet for a while.
Quietly typing on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Was it one of the ones with the sort of integrated tape deck, or was it a later one?
I don't remember. I think it was, so we had the ones, I think, with the good keyboard, like after the one that came later after the weird little square keys. I don't know if there was a tape deck. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's weird that I was going to say check the keyboard with the built-in cassette, but I wonder if that's just because that's the image I have of them.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Actually, I barely remember Wednesday, so I don't know. It was definitely a pet. I'm 90% sure it was a pet. I may have sat in front of a box. I may have been a strange child who's like, I am typing on a computer. They just left me alone, man. Who knows? But I'm pretty sure that was it. Like, that's the look of the one that we had. But it was definitely a pet. So I remember playing. Somebody else had a Space Invaders port for it that ran, and once that was on there, that stayed on there for like 24/7. No one wanted to turn off this computer, and it was just running that for weeks, and it was amazing. Because I could sit down and play Space Invaders.
Yeah, I don't think we had these ones, just because later in life, when I learned about this earlier one with the tape deck and the small square keyboard, that like weirdly orthogonal keyboard, it didn't look like a pet to me. I remember thinking, oh, that's not what a pet looks like, because I think we had the later ones with the more modernized keyboard. because I remember it just looking like a very similar keyboard to what the Apple IIs had when they came out. So I just thought that's what computer keyboards were.
Probably us too. Though of the three, the one that I actually had personally first was the Model 1. I became famously unbiased, but liking the Apple II. But it was the Model 1 that I actually had first as a computer. It was like technically my first like real computer. I had things before that were supposed to be computers, and they always disappointed me. I was like, this is not really a computer. It's a bunch of switches. This is not a computer. I've seen computers. They're supposed to have keyboards and play games and stuff. I knew what I wanted. And then these things came out, and I was like, this is what I want. These things, yes, they understand. This is what I want. And is it the case that I was coincidentally born at the perfect time after hundreds of thousands of years, that I was born right when these things would come out? Or is it just that these things changed who I was so dramatically that I am just, a lover of computers? Because my parents and all the older people I know, they got into stuff, but they still don't really understand computers, and I'm the tech support person. But also, what I didn't anticipate was all the younger people than me. It's not that they don't understand computers, it's they don't understand the point of them. They have phones, and why would you want this thing? It's a thing you use at work. And I'm just in that sweet spot where it was a computer that I could own, that I could use, and it was just, that's all I've ever wanted. And it just, makes me so happy. So luckily, born at the exact right time that this would come out when I was a kid.
So, question for you, because I don't know if I've ever spoken to an actual TRS-80 Model 1 owner, because my only experience with them was playing with them in Radio Shacks, which I think was a lot of us, because I think their success was largely down to their being low cost, and they had by far the best distribution network, because of course they had Radio Shack.
Yeah, I had a Model 1 and then a Coco, so I'm full-on TRS-A guy.
And in those days, like anyone under 40 may not realize this, but in those days, there was literally 7 Radio Shacks in every town above 1,000 people. Like they were just everywhere, everywhere. So you could easily see these things. But so my question for you,
imagine Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Radio Shack.
They sell resistors and TRS-80s back when Radio Shack was actually kind of cool, before they turned into cell phone stores and then nothing. Yeah. But actually, they still exist in Canada. Fun fact. Now it's called The Source. And if you want to buy a $200 HDMI cable, you sure can. But Carrington, my question for you is, what did you actually do with your TRS-80? Because
nothing. A little bit of basic stuff. And I owned it, and it was great. And I had it.
Because that was what
not useful, frankly, until later into the Apple II era. None of these were particularly useful, but they were way better than an Altair. Let me tell you, I could type things, and I could run, I could do a Hello World level of thing, and I could write a little mini adventure game or a question game or whatever, or I could make a dot move on the screen. That was mind blowing. Yeah. I could never do that with an Altair, like on the S100 stuff I played with. I don't know. I made buttons light on the front of those. That was not fun. This was fun. This was that's it. My weekend's done. I'm sitting down. I'm typing in basic things or trying to write stuff. And mostly I failed at it is what I did. Okay, fine. I failed.
Yeah, because I feel like there was a bit of a crossfade there between computers being just curiosities for electronics nerds like the Altair to being generally useful. Like you could go into the store and buy a game and play it like the Apple II. But between there was these machines like the TRS-80 Model 1, and I would lump in the the ZX81 in there as well, where it was technically a computer, but it did so little that, because I had a friend that it was a Timex Sinclair, the Canadian one, and
I had that.
Yeah, and it had those membrane keys, and you could kind of punch.
It was so small. People don't understand how small it was. Even when I had it, I was like, this is so small.
And you could very laboriously type in a very small basic program, but that was it. It didn't really play any games. It didn't really do anything. So it wasn't, I don't know, it was kind of below that line of where computers really got interesting, I feel like.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't until the Apple II era, and I got one of those finally. And it was like, this is a computer that I can go to a store and buy games for. I can do things for. I'm seeing all these people using it in their businesses. And very quickly became, this will be something useful. Everyone should buy it because you can have it in your business. But we all knew it was secretly for games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's the line maybe, is once you can go into a store and buy a game for it. That's the line where if you're below that line, you became irrelevant extremely quickly.
I think I never bought any software on tape or anything for the Model 1. I did for my Coco. I had a Coco and I bought a bunch of adventure games all on cassette for the Coco, totally. And I used the Coco to go on CompuServe. So it's a CompuServe guy.
Yeah, I don't even remember seeing software for sale for the TRS-80. Like it just seems like
I definitely never had anything. Apple,
it seems like there was
the Apple II. Then it was like totally.
Yeah, like there was a category of machines whose only purpose really was to type in tiny basic programs and play with that for 20 minutes, and then that was
so
all you could do with it.
It was
yeah, I mean, not to undersell that. I mean, that was a big deal to be able to. I mean, that's a lot of what I did with my Apple II. Also, was just type in silly little basic programs and watch little dots move around on the screen. Yeah, I mean, we would spend hours and hours and hours doing that. But I do feel like there's a line in the sand there where computers became kind of functional once you could buy software in a store for that machine. And only one of the Trinity, I feel like, back to get to the topic, crossed that line like the Apple II did. I don't feel like the TRS-80 or the PET really ever crossed that line.
Agreed.
Because where you could go to a store and buy software for them.
I think it was the expandability of the Apple II that really led to that. Whereas the Model 1 just got replaced by other things, and the PET got replaced by other things, and arguably made better. And Commodore's inarguably more successful. They replaced that with the 64, well, the VIC-20 before that, and just like stomped all over everybody else. But the PET really never took off. Whereas the Apple II was just like, okay, throw another card in it. But it was also such a massive investment. I wonder if people were just like digging the heels and going, I better make some use of this.
Yeah, I mean, the Apple II was certainly a higher end machine from the start, but there was also a technical line in the sand there, I think, that had to be crossed, right? Like you needed pixel addressable graphics, right? You needed a certain text resolution, like 40 by 8, like 40 by 24. Like there was some minimums, I think, that were required for a computer to be useful. And the Apple II was the first one to cross those lines because the model, the TRS-80, could only do ASCII text. It didn't have pixel addressable graphics. Neither did the PET. So there was very limited. It was very limited because of those things, what you could do in terms of writing real software. And same with the memory, like the PET was 4K or something, and TRS-80 was 16K, something like that. So again, you got the Apple II that comes along with 48K and high-res graphics and 40-column text and real scrolling text and all of these things. And now it's like, oh, okay, this is enough to where I can sell software written for this thing and people will buy it. So that might be a requirement as well to cross the line is that technical line in the sand.
I guess my impression of the TRS-80 line, I mean, so I don't know so much about the Model 1. It may have been like once they got to the Model 3 and so forth. I thought was fairly successful as a business machine. Like so you could definitely buy those like sort of brown soft binders of business software for them. And they didn't need to do
that as a Model 2 and especially
Model 3 I think Model 2 and 3 they leaned pretty hard into business stuff. I don't remember seeing like boxed business software for the Model 1,
right.
But I also wasn't looking for it. So Model 1 fans should write us and tell us if they were off buying accounts receivable software for their Model 1 that we don't know about. But.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was thinking is more that the line was not unsuccessful, I think, in that quadrant.
Yes. Yeah.
Model 1 was.
Yeah, I would say the specific machine was didn't cross the line. But yeah, certainly the TRS-80 range of computers, was certainly successful in many ways. And like Carrington said, I mean, they led to, the PET begat the Commodore 64, the most successful computer of all time. And the TRS-80s beget the Cocos, which were really quite amazing machines in many ways. And then even arguably the Tandy PCs after that. So, which were the most underappreciated PC flavors, if you ask me. So, yeah.
But the Apple II totally was like, for me, the life-changing thing. Even having had Model 1, the Apple II has directed the course of my computing life from that to Macs and to so many other things, and just like it got its hooks in me. Like the reason, I went to Kansas Fest. It's like the Apple II was the thing. Like having the color, being able to do stuff, buying games, the community, the expansion, like all of it was exactly what I was hoping a computer would be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how many lives, like you said, were totally transformed by the existence of that machine. Like I've often had that same thought. Like at the entire course of my life, almost every detail was set by that machine, and I wonder what would my life be if it had never existed. Would I be a Commodore person, and I'd be I don't know, writing Amiga software right now, or I don't know what would happen. What would have happened?
Yeah, I remember my main exposure to the TRS-80 was, I think, probably Model 3 that like a friend's father had for business. And so, like, we as kids would, like, there was some sort of animation software, where you could put little inverse blocks around the screen and then save them and then animate them. Although I think, I'm not even sure we could save them. I mean, I think it was sort of like, tonight we're going to make an animation that will not exist in the morning. But
you are so Banksy.
Yeah.
Yeah, storage was another thing, actually. I think that was another defining characteristic. Like, again, part of what made the Apple II so transformative was the disk drives were so good. Now, this is a bit of a North American biased conversation, because I know in Europe they didn't get disk drives until much later. But like, I never had the patience for tape drives. I used one or two computers with them, but I was never willing to write my own software and trust it to a tape. They were too slow and too unreliable. And so it wasn't until floppy drives came along that I was like, okay, this is something I'm willing to sit down and invest my time in, because this is fast, this is reliable, I can trust this. Whereas tape drives were just like, it was just like, really? Like, this is the thing that we're supposed to use? Like, it just seemed so terrible.
Mm-hmm. Norbert in the comments says that personally, I love to deal with the limitations and exploits of block character graphics, which is why I might prefer the PET to the C64. And I can see that. I feel like I can see that mostly retrospectively. Like, this is sort of it was maybe less fun at the time. I had a different friend who had a Commodore 64, and I was just amazed by the fact that you poke a couple of things and now you've got like a sprite running around the screen, unhindered by any sort of delays.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I strongly agree in retrospect. Limitations are kind of what make art. And it's why platforms like the Chip 8, like we talked about recently, continue to proliferate, because the restrictions are what make it fun. Because now we live in a world of infinite resources, and it's too much. Like, I can go, I have infinite memory and infinite storage, and I can fire up Unity and not even have to really do any programming and make a giant game. But it's not fun anymore. It takes all, like, that's why it's fun to write Apple II software now, or like 2GS, or specifically for the machines that have weird limits on them, like the memory layout is terrible, or the clock speed is too low, or it's those weird restrictions that kind of make it fun. And,
so I suspect that's, like, I completely agree, but I think us and our audience are the type of people who agree with that. That's why we're here, being retrocomputer enthusiasts.
Yeah.
But the people who are not retrocomputer enthusiasts was like, why would you want a computer that hobbles you with these things?
Yeah,
But
I can
me,
see that.
It's absolutely the appeal. I love old computers partly for this reason.
But it's true of like art as well, though. Like, people like making art with, like, there's the guy that his entire medium is arranging junk that's different colors, so that when you stand really far away, it looks like a portrait of some famous person or whatever. Like, people impose those restrictions on their own art to make it interesting. There's a carpenter that I follow on YouTube who makes fine furniture entirely out of old skate decks. And it's incredibly labor intensive. He has to, like, scrape off all of the grip tape and sand and process the wood in a certain way just to get down to the plywood. It's an incredibly labor intensive process, far more work than just going to buying some quality plywood to start with. But he loves doing that. It's his art is defined by the fact that everything's made with old skate decks. So I think there's some of that in it. Like, the art is kind of defined by the limits.
Yeah.
I agree. The Apple II was the best.
Anything else?
I think in summary,
in summary, there was a trinity, but the Apple II was the best of the three.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. I guess,
Famously unbiased.
Yeah. We can leave it at that. I suppose we will continue to tell our memories of the computers of 1977 anyway, as this podcast progresses. So, so now, where are we now? I guess we can switch to. Should we talk about listener feedback? I don't know.
Yeah, let's do it.
There's a couple of things. Well, actually, one of my news items is going to be a listener feedback thing. But let's see. I guess I don't know if we want to talk about this or not. We did. I think it came up on maybe the most recent one that we talked about. We don't because I think we were marveling at the fact that UNIVAC, like there was still a UNIVAC, kind of late into the in late years. It wasn't just like the 1960s or whatever. And so there's a kind of like a course of acquisition of companies that went, like UNIVAC became part of Sperry, and so it was like Sperry UNIVAC, and that's the name that sort of seems familiar. This wound up like Burroughs is involved, and then I think it's even currently Unisys. I mean, is the kind of the current I don't know, home of this IP and history. And they're still working with large computing as well. Yeah, whatever. I think I'm not. It's there's a part of this history that we've never, I think, controlled very well. And part of that, part of what I think of in those terms is just that, like, that was what the adults were doing when we were kids. They were doing things like processing finance and building things and whatever it is that the large computers did, processing payroll, and we were whatever, playing Zork. So but yeah, I mean, my mother is at when she was working, was a systems programmer, securities person on IBM mainframes, and so I heard all these terms and things, but it never seemed like particularly interesting. I would play Eliza occasionally on a 3270 while she was doing something important.
Yeah, there was very much a generational shift there for sure. Like, you either grew up with home microcomputers or you didn't. And that, I think most of us of our generation probably never encountered the big iron very much, except maybe in university. Like, the first time I'd ever seen a big iron system was in university. The first years used, I think it was a VAX that was running something. And so we had to, our first programming classes were in Miranda on VT100 terminals talking to this VAX. Yeah. But and even then, like, the people acknowledged, this thing is old. We're sorry you have to use it, but it's what we can afford or whatever. So I
did not like it. I was like, wait, nope. What is this? I was very comfortable with my setup, and now I don't understand.
It felt like moving backwards. It really did. Like, and then in second and third year, we got into the Spark stations and stuff, and we got access to those better labs, the graphics workstations, and that felt like moving forward again, because it's like, oh, okay, here's machines that are better than what I have at home, but like the VT100 just felt worse. And it's like, why are we learning on this stuff?
I definitely have, I have at least a moderate amount of interest in like understanding how these machines work, and I think we've expressed the opinion before that they're radically different, and they're hard to understand, and it's possible that that's not actually true. I think some of this is terminology, but they were designed for such different things, and they you really had to be an expert. You had to be a wizard. You were trained in this, and you brought up the devices and that sort of thing. And it's not easier now. I mean, like, you still have to, like, all that stuff was hard then. It required reading the manuals and understanding complex concepts and in terminology that is different from what you're used to. Even if we all use computers now and could program them, it turns out it was still hard. You still have to learn that stuff. It's like whatever the IRQs in the PC, they're still a pain in the neck, even if it is 2024.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a coming of age bias there, right? Like, home computers seem easy and obvious to us because that's what we grew up with, and mainframes seem cryptic and obscure and impossible because that was before us. But I try to show my Apple II stuff to my 16-year-old nephew, and he's just like, what is this? This is terrible. Like, none of this makes any sense. Why is everything so hard? Why is everything done so poorly? So it's, I see that with him, but I think it's just a bias of when we grew up.
Yeah. So I think this little bit of conversation was sparked by a feedback that I think I will give more, like, I'll whatever, we'll do an actual feedback section later that will be included in. So
feed that back.
Yes. But so at the end of the show, I will and have often said something about like sending email to us at a feedback address. And at some point we will actually catch up enough that it sort of makes sense to to actually insert this into the show. Right now, mostly people are hearing things so much later than we record them that it always seems kind of like we've forgotten what we talked about when when we get this feedback.
Yeah,
so
that thing we said 6 months ago was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably.
Yeah. Any moment now we'll catch up. But for the moment, I think we can turn to items of interest in news. And Carrington, you have the first of those.
That will be interesting. That will be newsworthy. What have I got? Electromechanical lunar lander. How's that for a phrase that makes you interested, right?
Yep.
I love electromechanical games. Lunar lander is a game that existed, but like whatever, let's combine them. So a guy named Chris Fenton has put together an electrical mechanical lunar lander. So obviously the lunar lander doesn't fly around. Instead, as you move, the globe he's created rotates. So what a fantastic idea. So you have a little you play lunar lander, but it rotates a physical globe that you try to land your little lander on. And so here's an image of the lander, which kind of goes down and up. So as it's approaching the gravity well of the little planet, as you rotate or apply thrust, you can hold it still, or the planet will rotate around you as you turn. There's a little video at the end of him actually doing a landing. And I love that people would do this. Like, this is hilarious. That somebody has spent the time making this. And so that shows you how this game plays. And the actual moon rotates as the ship kind of tries to do thrusting and do a landing. And like, how fun is this? This has no purpose to exist other than to be delightful. And I love that somebody spent the time doing this and creating an electromechanical lunar lander. And so lunar lander's been in the news quite a bit lately for other things. I thought, okay, let's bring it up again. I was never a fan of lunar lander. Like, it's not an awesome game, but this version really appeals to me. I think everything is better as an electromechanical game. So look, he's doing a landing. Look at that. Well done, Chris. So I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. So it's a little video you can watch and also read about how he executed all the various elements. And so I was impressed. I dug it.
That's really cool. Yeah, my only exposure to lunar lander was always it was the game they always had in like planetariums or like kids science museums, the Explore Mazatorium or whatever and they would have fun science games and they would always have lunar lander in those places. That's the only place I've ever played it.
Science Center, alas, boo.
I heard that they have to move it because the roof is collapsing.
No, they don't. The current stupid government wants to move it to a different place to make money. And so like 20 years ago, they said it'll cost $20 million to fix the roof. They just cut off funding instead. And now they're like, oh, it'll be too expensive to fix the roof. It's like 40 million now. And so we'll rather spend the 48 million to move it and we'll make a bunch. It's terrible. Everything's awful. So
anyway, Ontario news clip aside, this is a neat project. I'm with Carrington. I like electromechanical things. And there was a whole generation of electromechanical arcade games that a lot of folks don't actually know very much about. Between pinball and video games, there were electromechanical arcade games. A lot of like horse
ones, driving things and submarine things, and like a bunch of. I love electromechanical arcade games.
Yeah, certain genres were popular because they were easier to implement. So there's a lot of like horse racing games and basketball type things, and a lot of baseball was another popular topic for them. But yeah, there was a little mini generation of those games that came along before video games. But neat things.
As a kid, we used to go to, oddly, we'd go to a drive-in movie theater. So you'd leave Toronto, you'd go north of Toronto, and it was just like farmers' fields, nothing, because you wanted to get out of the city and have complete darkness. So there's a highway called Highway 400, and you go all the way up Highway 400 to Highway 7, and it was just like, it was like welcome to Saskatchewan, just plains of nothing. And because of that, though, it was fun to go like out of the city and way up north, and we'd watch movies at the 400 drive-in because it was so remote. And I'm bringing up the remoteness because that's where it was. I can see the location from my building. I am like a block away. And it is crazy because I am in a massively built up residential / industrial area where all it is massive infrastructure as far as the horizon. And when I was in high school, this was farmer's field with nothing, and I should have bought all of it.
Right.
So it's crazy that, and anyway, I brought it because at that drive-in, they had a whole bunch of what even felt at the time to be old arcade games. So a bunch of submarine things, all which were mechanical, and I loved them. So I'd go to drive-in movies as a kid, and I would play all the electromechanical arcade games, and I adored them all.
If for anyone who's interested in this kind of stuff, there's a guy, a British fellow named Tim Hunkin, and he's most accessible now on YouTube. A lot of his stuff is on YouTube, and he's kind of a famous British inventor builder guy. He builds mechanical art, and he has an electromechanical arcade in London that he has built all the machines in it for. And so you can find tours done by him on YouTube of these machines, and he goes into deep detail on how they work, how he built them, and so on. He's also got a series that was translated from BBC called The Secret Life of, and he talks about like the secret life of switches, and he goes through all the different switches you can buy and what they're all for, and so on, that kind of thing. But the games he builds, they're modern and new, a lot of modern themes, but very electromechanical and very fun in nature. So really, really fun to watch the stuff that he built. So Tim Hunkin, that's Hunkin.
Cool.
All right. Cool. We will make sure that is in the show notes.
Yeah, we're coming for you, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah, I think back on Lunar Lander, I was just thinking that like it always seemed like it wasn't fun. It was like to teach you how hard it was for people to accomplish the thing that they did.
Yes, that's a great description. Yeah, it wasn't fun per se, but it made you appreciate what the Apollo pilots actually had to do. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was never fun. No iteration of that was ever fun because I was always terrible at it. Like, yeah, it was so unforgiving.
Yeah, it was difficult, and no margin of error for sure.
Yeah. Much better would be some sort of like land on a sea of pillows or something where, it's much easier to do. Okay, let's see. I guess I'm on my next thing here. So my thing came from, I guess we were talking about feedback and how we should include it. It came from feedback on episode 274. So this was pointing out the existence of an Apple II emulator that was created for the Coco 3. So if you have a Coco 3 and you want to run Apple II software, you can, in some limited way, run it on your Coco 3.
It would be all about the limitations, because that's not a... I agree that the Cocos have a crazy, amazing chip in them, but that doesn't seem like such a sufficiently advanced computer that it's going to very easily emulate an Apple II.
But that's the fun of it, I guess, in a way.
That's the art.
And there's probably some sort of law or formula for how much bigger a system needs to be than the one you're emulating in order for it to be good. And I feel like
that could be Quinn's law.
Yeah. And the Coco 3 emulating an Apple II, that's got to be pretty close to that line, if not below it. But
for most of the history of Apple computers, or Macintosh computers in particular, it's always been, you need a computer the next generation over what you're using now to properly do Windows things. Trust me, next time it'll be great.
Yes, that is true, yes.
So, and of course, this thinking about that led me to remember Kansas Fest 2016 when Michael Mann presented emulating a Burroughs 220 on an Apple II.
Yes, I remember that talk. That was neat.
Yeah. So if you wanted to, you can get this Burroughs 220 emulator for the Apple II. There's actually a couple of different versions. The Burroughs 220 simulator version 2.1, I think, is the most recent of them. I think that was more recent than the one he presented. But of course, the goal would be to then emulate a Burroughs 220 on an Apple II running on a Coco. Which probably will take between Kansas Fests to execute.
Yeah. I love this talk because we always think forward, like, okay, how much of a computer do I need to emulate an Apple II really well? But I love that he went the other way. Like, oh, okay, well, how old of a computer does it have to be before the Apple II can emulate it really well? And yeah, it turns out you go back to some of those early mainframes, they weren't fast. They weren't, very good by 70s or 80s standards. So you can absolutely emulate them on an 8-bit machine. So I kind of love that idea, going the other way.
Yeah, that was a really interesting talk too. Because he was going through the history of what you would do with the Burroughs 220 and what what its architectural configuration was and so forth. So.
Yeah, and what he had to go through to learn the architecture sufficiently well to emulate it, because that's not easy, right? If you want to emulate this obscure mainframe from the 60s or whatever, you need to find all the technical documentation for it, which is probably not that easy to get and not that easy to understand. So yeah, because to emulate a machine, you really have to understand it, every nut and bolt. So that's quite a journey.
So the Burroughs 220 was the last commercial vacuum tube computer. So I wonder if there's also competition or contention about the word last.
Yeah, probably.
As much as first.
I mean, honestly, yeah, since you mentioned it, yeah, there is competition because the Soviets used vacuum tubes in all their computing, in all of their military computing hardware, like well into the 90s.
Did you say used like past tense?
Yeah. So I recently learned about this because I am an insufferable hipster and got a vacuum tube preamp for my phonograph or my record player, turntable, whatever you want to call it, and
gramophone.
Yeah, and so it came and all of the tubes have Cyrillic writing on them, and I was like, that's weird. So I started researching this, and yeah, basically all vacuum tubes now that people are using and stuff like this for modern hipster stuff, they're all Soviet surplus basically. Because the only factories still making them in any kind of quantities are all in Russia, because the Soviets, for EMP resistance, for radiation resistance, used vacuum tubes. So like the American solution was to like lead line and harden everything. The Soviets just used vacuum tubes for all their stuff. So even like the avionics computers and their fighter jets and stuff were all vacuum tube. So there was this whole infrastructure of vacuum tube production that existed in the Soviet Union. And now Russia and the former Soviet republics still have all of this old Soviet military hardware that they have to maintain. So they keep making vacuum tubes for this stuff. And so now we can buy them and put them in our ridiculous record player preamps. Yeah.
Why those Russian airplanes have just a warmer sound, man.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
Excellent. Maybe I should go back and just observe that the Apple II Coco is not a full emulator. So it can do basic stuff. Basically, It's not. I don't think, for example, you could run Choplifter on it. But
right. Fair enough.
Yeah, but it's still an amusing and impressive feat. So.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. And with that, I will move on to the next thing, which is Quinn's thing.
Yeah, so...
Perhaps segued not so poorly.
Yeah, I did a thing. Let's see here. It's a little bit old news by the time this recording may go out, but I'm going to talk about it here because I haven't really talked about it very publicly yet. So the only news of it is really on the Apple II Slack channel. And I found out by this how many people follow me on GitHub, because I posted I started putting up the repository, and while I was putting it up, I suddenly started getting emails about all the things that were broken because I was in the middle of putting it up. I was like, so that was an unexpected, but nice thing. So I'm just hamming it up here while I try to find the tab. Okay, so sharing to the stream. So what I have done is a full reverse engineer of Choplifter. And I didn't start out with this goal to do this, but this is what ended up happening. So I started with the disk image. I pulled a disk image off of archive.org, specifically the 4 a.m. crack, because I wanted a clean original disk image that didn't have any splash screens of pixelated boobs on it or anything like that. And I wanted to make sure the entire game was there, because a lot of the cracks from back in the day, they had, title screens missing or other things missing to make room for their pixelated boobs. So I wanted the complete game in its unadulterated form. And but I didn't want to deal with copy protection. So because I wanted to be able to run it in an emulator. And so the 4am crack is really the one that meets all those criteria. And extra bonus, the 4am crack has fixed a bug in the Choplifter had. The original Choplifter only ran on the Apple II Plus because it has this copy protection thing in it that a lot of those games did, where they were trying to detect ROM, EEPROM debugging tools that were used for cracking. And so they would look for certain memory patterns in ROM to see if you had one of these things plugged in, and that would break on the Apple IIe. So when the Apple IIe came out, Choplifter wouldn't run on it. It just displays an M in the upper left-hand corner of the screen and won't boot. So so 4am has this tool called Anti-M, which then got incorporated, I believe, into Passport, his cracking tool, which fixes that bug. But it's one of those things where, so Broderbund, who published Choplifter, fixed that bug later when the Apple IIe came out. They patched it and then re-released it. So if you bought Choplifter after a certain date, it didn't have that bug anymore. But all of the disk images now that are out there are all the older one. So you basically can't find a disk image of Choplifter that runs on an Apple IIe. So that's why 4am is the hero that we need but don't deserve. So anyways, I started with his disk image, and I just wanted to do a full reverse engineer of it and generate source code that could build into a disk image that is identical to the original, and document as well everything as far as how it works. So I spent, I don't know how long it was. I keep saying 5 weeks or something, but I think it was longer than that. I think I'm kidding myself, but it was a lot of nights and weekends of just going through, disassembling little pieces of it at a time and trying to figure out what it was doing. And then I just little by little generated source code that would then compile back into working Choplifter. And it was an amazing journey. I learned so much about it. I got so much respect for the game. I already had respect for the game, but the code, seeing how it was all written, was really beautiful. What surprised me about it, I thought it was going to be mainly a technical exercise, but it was also an archaeological one, because I learned I learned a lot about Dan's process for how he wrote it, which I didn't expect. So for example, there are a lot of jump tables in the code, and jump tables have many functions in 6502. They make it, for example, easy to move code around if you want to, or most importantly, probably, they make it easy to swap out code. So if you want to have, you can have a pointer to a function, and then you can, at runtime, swap out that pointer and make a particular function do something different. So that's what you assume when you see a jump table in code, is that's what they're using it for. Choplifter is full of jump tables, and none of them ever change. So he's not actually using it as a modular system. It could only have been a development tool. So he was using it because it made it easy for him to keep track of where the code was, and so that he could move it around in memory without having to, fix up all of his jumps every time. So I think what that means probably is that he was using a fairly primitive assembler linker type environment, because he didn't have, a sophisticated development system that could move code around for him and keep all of his labels, pointed in the right places. So he was doing all of that by hand. And the other way that you can tell is because these jump tables were all at round numbers in memory, which, again, no assembler or linker is going to do that, right? So the jump tables were at 1,000 hex and 2,000 hex and 6,000 hex and 9,000 hex. So again, that's how you know a human being did that.
Yeah, totally human chosen.
Yeah, there's just stuff like that where you'd see these marks, these fingerprints of a human being all throughout that were really, really cool. So there was so much more of that type of realization than I expected. You could also kind of see him learning how to build the game. Like because of the earlier functions in memory were things that were more experimental and more primitive. And then as he got more sophisticated with the platform and with his ideas for the game, the code got more complex as you went down in memory. So like one of the earliest functions in memory is a routine that draws a solid colored rectangle, which if you're going to sit down and write a game on a new platform, that's the first thing you're going to write. And so that was it, like 1,000 something or other in memory. But then all the rest of the rendering was way down below. So later on, he'd gotten kind of organized and decided, okay, I'm going to put all my rendering code down here at 9,000, but way up here at 1,000 is this one colored rectangle drawing routine. So again, you could just kind of see, you could get into his head and just see him developing this game that way. So yeah, that was all really cool. It was a pretty amazing exercise that I learned a lot. And I think if you want to write an Apple II game or for whatever platform, there are a few better ways to learn the techniques than doing this. Because now, like, I'm actually working on a new 8-bit game now from using a lot of the techniques that I learned from understanding Choplifter. Like he just does a lot of things that are nice and clean and simple, and are just a really good way to do things on the platform. So just seeing how a pro actually did it is really, really educational. When I write my own stuff, I tend to overcomplicate the solutions, or I think too much in a modern way. Like that's a lot of it too. Like in the modern code, we think very much in elaborate layers of abstractions and so on. But a lot of that's frankly unnecessary when you see how clean and simple Choplifter is. So a good example, the Choplifter has a self-playing demo, right? So you've got a main game loop that runs when you're playing the game. It's like, update, render, read the joystick, update, render, read the joystick. For the self-playing demo, rather than running that same loop and like having a lot of elaborate logic to control the demo, he just has a complete separate copy of that game loop. And he just modifies it. So like, why wouldn't you? And in a modern context, we would say, oh, that's terrible, because then if you have a bug, you have to fix it in 2 or 3 places now. But the code is so small that it doesn't really matter if you have to fix that one little bug in 2 places. And it actually makes the code a lot cleaner, more linear, and easier to read if you keep the main loop very, very simple. So the main loop has no branching in it, because the only conditionals that would be in it would be for the self-playing demo or for the victory animation, which both have a version of the main loop. So he has 3 copies of the main loop instead of having a whole bunch of complicated logic to keep it all in one function. So, things like that, where it's like our modern sensibilities for what good code looks like don't always apply. And sometimes the old ways actually are easier. So I've been applying a lot of that to my own retro programming now, for sure.
Cool.
So cool exercise all around.
Also, one of the all-time greatest games, like just shockingly good.
Yeah,
not even good for the time, just shockingly good, like crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Somebody made that game.
It was a great target for this exercise because, it's such a good game. It's one of my favorite games. It's also a very small game. Like it's 64 points. You pick up 64 dudes. There's only one level. There's only one environment. It's entirely memory resident. That was a key. Like I wouldn't try to. Me personally, I would not try to do this with like Ultima 4 or something, or some big complicated game that's swapping code and graphics out all the time as you move around. This game, once it's booted, the entire thing lives in memory. So you can just literally, what I did is I dumped the contents of memory from Virtual 2, and that was my starting point. So I didn't have to, deal with the actual disk image itself, which really made life easier. And furthermore, it's an Apple II Plus game. It's 1982, so it's only a 48K game. So it's single high res, and it's 48K. So it's about as small as a full blown Apple II game can be. So it's that all makes it a lot easier as well.
Plus, if you didn't really love the game, it'd be hard to spend the time doing this, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of time in this game.
Yeah, it has to be a labor of love for sure. And it has to be a game that you know really well. So that was the other key to success here, was I've played so much of Choplifter that when you're reading the code, you know what you're looking for. So when you're, reading the code that animates the little men running around, as a devoted player of the game, you know that every couple of seconds, the little dudes stop and wave at you. And if you don't know that, then you're not going to recognize when you see this weird little loop frame counter check in the middle of the man updating code that then jumps over here and renders something. You don't know what that is, but that's got to be the little waving code, because I know that every few seconds they do that. So those little cues made the whole process so much easier. So you got to know the game. You got to love the game to make it through this process. And it helps also that it was everybody's favorite game for the most part. So it makes the result historically significant in some way, which is kind of gratifying as well.
Yeah, so here's why is there this checked to see if there's a person under the helicopter?
Yeah, exactly.
We all know you can squash these people.
Yes. Yeah. And what's also amazing though is I learned things I didn't know were there. So I played that game for hundreds of hours, and I've played it a lot as an adult too recently. It's one of my go-tos when I want to do some retro gaming. And through all that time, I did not know there is a climbing into the chopper animation on those men. And it's because it's so fast. So when the chopper's sitting on the ground and the little dudes run up to it and they jump into the helicopter, there is a 2-frame animation of them climbing into the helicopter.
I honestly thought they just blipped in.
Yep, that's what I thought. I thought they just disappear and they're in the chopper. But and I struggled for a while because I had found these sprites that, when you look at an Apple II sprite that's only 7 pixels high in isolation without context, you're just like, what is this blob? And I found this code inside the little man update code that was rendering these 2 blobs in this one case that was somehow related to chopper loading, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it wasn't until I stepped through the process frame by frame in the emulator that I saw it animate the frames one after the other. And then I saw, oh, it's the guy getting into the chopper. But it's so fast that you don't see it really. And similarly, there is a muzzle flash. When the chopper fires, there's a single frame of like a little orange burst that comes out of the cannons on the chopper. And again, I have never seen that effect. But if you step through it frame by frame, it's there. It's just very, very subtle. So yeah, little stuff like that. And I mean, there was so much stuff like that. I can't even list it all. The y-axis in this game is flipped. The y is at the bottom of the screen instead of top. Y equals 0 is at the bottom of the screen, which is the reverse of every other game ever written in a 2D platform, which I think is really interesting. I think it's probably related to Dan's background is probably in math and computer graphics. There was a big argument back in the day of whether Y0 should be at the bottom or the top of the screen, and it's at the top for hardware scanning reasons, for the memory for the video scanner to scan video memory. It does it from low addresses to high addresses, and so that's why Y is 0 at the top. But in math, Y0 is always at the bottom and counts upwards. So mathematicians always thought computers were dumb because they have the Y-axis flipped. But yeah, Dan did it that way because, of course, on the Apple II, you have to write a lookup table to linearize video memory, and so it's free to flip the Y-axis if you want to, and so he did. And so all of his math is kind of, which actually makes sense too because it's a chopper simulation, so it kind of makes sense to have positive Y being up towards the sky so that positive velocities are causing the helicopter to climb. So it all kind of makes sense for the game as well. But because of how much other stuff is done in kind of a classically computer graphics mathematician-y sort of way, I think that says something about Dan's educational background as well. For example, the chopper tilts when it flies back and forth, which, a classic video game programmer would immediately say, well, you need 5 copies of the sprite, 1 at each angle, and you look them up in a table. But there's a whole system of code in Choplifter that actually rotates a single sprite mathematically.
Oh.
And it didn't end up being what he used in the end for some of it. Like the main chopper sideways flying is actually done with multiple sprites, but the code is in there to actually rotate it mathematically as well. And he didn't end up using it. So it was in the dead code that isn't called from anywhere. So again, I think it's you could see the stuff that he tried that didn't work and then went on to other solutions. But the mathematical tilting code is still used in a couple of other places. It's used when the chopper is facing the camera and it tilts just slightly as you fly back and forth. That is done. That is done with transformation rather than multiple sprites. Stuff like that was just all over the place.
Very cool.
And then, of course, you find all the hotkeys. Like there's a cheat key that lets you control how many enemies are on screen, and you find all of that kind of stuff as well that ends up shipping. All the little debug hotkeys and stuff that he had are all in there still, of course. So that's fun.
That was one of the things I really did appreciate about that game was sort of like the physics and fluidity of everything. Like it really it really felt right. It would lean when you flew, and just the way you could fly backwards and catch the jets, shoot your missiles at the jets.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can see in the code that's where all of the effort went. Like it's no accident that it feels so good to fly the chopper. There is so much code. Probably 30% of the code in the game is devoted entirely to making that chopper feel good. Like there are so many special cases. Like, it's got all these behaviors when you're sitting on the ground, but you're not quite on the ground. You can you can settle it down in different ways. And if you fly down into the ground, it'll bounce and it'll stick to the ground a little bit. But then if you push hard up, then it'll take off. And all those little behaviors are all special cases in the code. It's all intentional. And all of those little things must have just come out of hours of play testing, flying this chopper back and forth and deciding, okay, it needs a little more, inertia here and a little more gravity there. And there's special cases for gravity. If you're tilted this way, gravity gets a little less so that you don't feel like you're flying into the ground. And I guess there's so much of that stuff in there, which made it very difficult to reverse engineer. The chopper physics stuff is where my reverse engineer gets the weakest. There's definitely a few areas where I'm like making some educated guesses about what this little fudging code here is doing and why that's there. A lot of it was just like, commenting out this weird little check to see how the chopper feels different. And it's like, oh, if I comment that out, now the chopper feels too sticky on the ground. It's hard to take off, you know, and so that's what this little fudge is doing. So a lot of it is just kind of guessing exactly what it's for. But yeah, it's clear that a lot of effort went into that. And that's why the game is so fun to play, for sure.
So did you find any
that part.
Easter eggs?
Yeah, a couple. So I talked about the hotkeys. So Control L and then a number key from 1 to 7 will set the difficulty level, which is basically how many enemies are on the screen at a time. And so every time you go back to the base, it increases the difficulty level. So if it gets too hard, you can just hit Control L and 1, and it'll go back to just a single tank at the bottom, and you don't have 3 aliens and 2 jets chasing you around all the time. But so the other cool thing is, I think this is a hypothesis, I can't confirm this, but I think the game originally had vertical scrolling as well, because the horizontal scrolling code and the horizontal clipping code all has support for vertical as well. It just never gets used anywhere. And so, I think the original game design probably allowed you to fly up the top of the screen and have the ground scroll away and then fly and then come back down again and scroll in both dimensions. The Y scrolling values just get passed as 0 everywhere, but the actual scrolling and clipping code all handles vertical as well. So I think he had that in mind. And so I do wonder what the full story is there. It would actually be fairly easy, I think, to re-enable all of that stuff and just see what happens. The other reason I think he was playing with it and didn't like it is the very first couple lines of code after the bootloader drops you into the main game code. There's a couple of debug lines right at the top that are just calling the vertical scroll routine with hard-coded values. And it's just like, it very much looks like testing code that then got left in there. It's harmless, but it sets some vertical scrolling values that then immediately get reset, and then the game starts normally. So I think he was playing with it right to the end, maybe, and then decided the vertical scrolling wasn't a good idea. But yeah, so the other thing about it is, because it's such an early Apple II game, they didn't all know all the tricks right away, right? So one of the main tricks that we all know now is, so with the Apple II being that each byte has 6 pixels in it and they're reversed, it's very complicated to render something pixel accurately. You end up doing a lot of dividing by 7 and modulus of 7 to render things on a specific pixel. And so what we now know to do is create pixel shifted versions of all of your sprites. So you create 7 versions of every sprite sitting on a different pixel. And that saves you all that math. Choplifter does not do that. Being, I think, an early game, people hadn't thought of that trick yet, or some people had and some people hadn't thought of it yet. And so Choplifter actually does the math for all of that stuff. And not only that, but all of the clipping and physics and everything is all also pixel accurate. So you can see this in the emulator if you stop it just right, like when the tanks drive in from the left, they actually pixel accurately clip to the edge of the screen. Now, Apple II high res being what it is, you can't be exactly perfect because you get weird fringing artifacts whenever you chop pixels in certain boundaries. And so you can see you get this like little fringe of like purple and green garbage on the edges of the tank as they come in, because he's pixel accurately clipping them rather than having them just pop in at the edge of the screen, or maybe doing it on byte boundaries. He does it pixel accurate. So you get this little noise of pixel garbage as the tanks scroll in on the left edge. Little details like that again, when you're playing the game, you don't notice that at all. But the fact that he went to the trouble of pixel accurate clipping of all of the sprites to the screen edges is just phenomenal. And the code to do that is complicated and expensive. So he absolutely did not need to do that, but he did. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess that's, as you say this, I'm just thinking, why is this game not super slow? Because it isn't. It could be much faster, maybe.
That shocked me. Is he's kind of, no disrespect, he's kind of doing everything the hard way in terms of performance, and yet it is still one of the fastest and smoothest games on the platform. So it's just a really good game design. Like, there isn't really that much stuff moving on screen at once. So he was very, very clever about creating a feel of a screen full of stuff moving, but there isn't actually much stuff moving. So like when the world is scrolling, all that's really moving is these mountain ranges in the distant background. That's all that's actually moving on screen is those mountain ranges. But that creates this whole parallax scrolling effect just with doing that. So there's a lot of little tricks like that. And then even though there's only like maybe one tank and one jet on the screen at a time and a couple of little men, it's enough to make it feel like a very busy, crazy kind of environment. So
yes,
he gets a lot done with very little kind of elements on the screen. I think that's part of it. So it's good game design is kind of compensates for the technical differences. But I do think you could probably double the frame rate in that game if you went back and applied all of the kind of modern Apple II programming techniques, pre-calculating sprite shifts and byte aligned rendering for everything. Because even his title graphics, like when it comes in and it's like Broderbund, copyright, whatever, Choplifter, all of that stuff is all pixel aligned as well. And again, it's like, my goodness, why wouldn't you just byte align all that artwork? But he didn't, it doesn't. The game does not suffer for that, honestly, because it doesn't feel slow at all. But yeah, and he took everything that he learned, I'm sure, because he went on then to write Earhart, which is generally considered one of the best rendering engines on the Apple II for the entire history of the platform. Incredibly fast, smooth, like 3D, double high res, like just crazy good rendering engine. Mm-hmm. So it's clear that he took what he learned from Choplifter and really built on it.
I remember Earhart, the first time I fired up on a 2GS, I was like, what the heck, man?
Yeah. Oh, Earhart is bananas. Like you run that on an Apple IIe and it's like a game out of another world. You can't even believe the platform is capable of that. It's and I mean, there never was a game that good after that either. Like it wasn't like everyone else saw that and went, oh, okay, we can do this now. No, it's like everyone else was just like, I don't know how he did that. Like, I can't touch that.
Do we know anything about his history pre-Choplifter? I mean, like was Choplifter the first game? I mean, like you were sort of talking as if he was learning it along the way. So maybe.
Yeah, I think it maybe was, but I don't know that for a fact. I tried to find out. So fun postscript to this story. Dan Gorlin sent me an email a few weeks ago because word got around about this. And
did it have the word cease and desist in it?
Yeah, no. But out of the blue, I got an email saying, "Hey, I'm glad you liked my game. It was really neat to read your write up of it. Signed, Danny Gorlin." And I'm just like
whoa.
For listeners, I'm making the head explosion emoji on the stream. Yeah, that was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, we chatted a little bit about it. He was happy to talk about it a bit. And he said that he thinks he probably has the original source code and related notes and stuff on floppies in his attic. So I've hopefully not too desperately soundingly begged him to please let us image those discs and preserve them. He has not gotten back to me, but if you're listening, Dan, offer still stands. No pressure. I understand if it's not something you are interested in doing, but I hope I haven't heard back from him since, so I hope he'll agree to let us save those as similar to what we did with, the community did with Jordan Mechner's, source code for Prince of Persia, because I do worry about stuff like that degrading and not being readable here pretty soon. But that kind of thing is just really valuable Apple II history. So hopefully he'll be into that. I told him I could hook him up with Jason Scott or other folks who'd be very happy to go over there and make it easy for him. But I was also hoping to do maybe a little bit of an email interview with him, just talk about his experiences and stuff. But yeah, I'm sure he's a busy guy, so haven't heard back yet. But it was just really neat, though, to get that email. That was super thrilling to chat with him a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's excellent. And the community has the technology to preserve this stuff, I think, now much more even than it did with Jordan Mechner's discs.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah. So it was an incredible experience. I strongly recommend it for other people. This is, I guess, becoming a pretty popular thing to do. I was certainly not the first person to do something like this. It's funny, while I was doing this, I learned for the first time about the big load runner reverse engineer that was done recently. I don't know if we've talked about it on the show or not yet, but it didn't get a lot of press. I think when it came out, it just kind of quietly appeared on GitHub, and then people on the Apple II Slack were like, hey, has anyone seen this? This guy did this crazy full reverse engineer of load runner. So that has also been done. And it was really neat to compare Choplifter to load runner because they're fairly contemporary. They're close in release date, I think 82, 83, 84, somewhere in there. and to see the different techniques that they used. So, for example, LoadRunner, to handle the sprite shifting that I talked about, the six or 7 bit shifts, LoadRunner does that with a lookup table. So it only has one set of sprites instead of 7, but it shifts them with a lookup table. And the lookup table is cleverly compressed so that duplicate bit patterns are eliminated. So it knows how to take a given byte of any sprite and shift that byte onto different alignments for the correct pixel. So it's kind of halfway between pre-calculating all the shifts and doing all the math. It's this kind of halfway point. So I thought that was really neat to just to kind of see the craft of Apple II game development evolve through the source code of these contemporary games. And then, seeing the different techniques for a tile-based game like LoadRunner versus a freeform physics game like Choplifter was also neat. Seeing how they did those different things. So yeah, really cool.
One of the main things I kind of wish about LoadRunner was that circle could be sped up.
Yes.
That stupid circle. I'm sure it was very impressive at the time.
Yes, the circle. Yeah, if it was only skippable, that would be nice, because it's neat. It's really neat the first couple times, and then the 500th time that day that you've died and you have to watch it do this and then do this. It's like, okay, now I'm over it. But
and if that wasn't clear to people, there's an iris effect that takes its time, swallowing the screen and redrawing the screen.
Yeah, a very neat effect, but yeah, it's a little slow. So it was it's definitely neat to contrast and compare how the two games handled all of the quirks of the Apple II platform. So another good one to look at is the high bit. So that's a notoriously difficult graphics problem on the Apple II. I mentioned that each byte has 6 pixels in it. The 7th byte is a quote unquote palette bit, which determines whether all of the pixels in that byte are either green and pink or blue and orange. And managing that high bit in your graphics on the Apple II is extremely difficult, and seeing how different games solve that problem is interesting. So LoadRunner's solution was just to make everything blue and orange and just give up on it. So just high bit set and everything. Choplifter handles that really quite cleverly. He has a global state for the palette bit, and before he renders things, he sets that bit, and then that bit is automatically ORed into all of the rendering. So when he renders things on the screen, he ORs in, what's already on the screen with the new pixels with the palette bit. And so it's inexpensive, but gives him a lot of flexibility for mixing the different color palettes. So the score block at the top of the screen, for example, mixes pink and orange and green, different palettes. And that's all handled pretty transparently by the way he does this palette bit thing. So, good techniques there as well. Lots to learn. Yeah. So,
very cool.
So for anyone who's interested, we'll have a link in the show notes to my GitHub, which has, again, the full source code, builds and runs with a makefile to a working Choplifter disk image. And it's all documented to the best of my ability. I did my very best to comment every single line of that source code and explain exactly what it's all doing. And so if you want to learn how to write Apple II games, I think you could do a whole lot worse than reading the Choplifter source and seeing how it's done. And again, because it's a small game, I think it's more approachable, because you can also get the source code for Prince of Persia. That is now also available. But Prince of Persia is a late Apple II game and incredibly sophisticated. So that code is hard to read because it's so sophisticated and complex. Choplifter, pretty simple game, honestly, for how good it is. So the code is much more approachable, much more readable, and easy to learn from. So that's all there. I also did a blog write-up that's linked from the GitHub, just describing the experience and some of the cooler things that I learned in the process of doing it.
One thing about the Prince of Persia source code is that it's the real code. It's like it's actually Jordan Mechner's code,
exactly.
and comments.
Yeah.
Which is probably both good and bad, because your own comments are only kind of there to remind you of what you were thinking.
Yes.
And reverse engineering, you've put so much more thought into it that you're going to explain it more in the comments as well.
Yeah, because I had a primary goal of explaining the code, whereas the person who wrote the code originally, their primary goal is to finish the game. So they're only going to document probably as much as they have to maintain their own sanity. But yeah, I was explicitly trying to illuminate the code. But the flip side of that is I don't necessarily I didn't necessarily get it all right. Like I said, there's definitely some educated guessing. If I wasn't sure, I always noted it in the comments, like, this is what I think this is doing, but I'm not really sure. Or I don't know what this does, but if I comment it out, that's what breaks. There's a little bit of that here and there. Yeah, that's the trade-off. Take what you read with a grain of salt. I might not have always gotten it right.
That was one thing that I was thinking of, back a ways when we were talking about needing to know the game well. That's the place where, you comment this out and you notice you stick to the ground more or whatever. I mean, like that's, you've got to know the game super well to be able to detect something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you can test hypotheses that way because you know what to test. You're like, oh, this looks like maybe it's somehow related to squishing the little dudes when you sit down on them. You have to know that's a thing that happens in order to test that hypothesis. Yeah, otherwise, again, because, if I comment out this code, the little dudes aren't squishable anymore. If you don't know the game does that, you'd never find that's what
I like
that
how
code is
by
doing.
test this hypothesis, you mean squish some little dudes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as a side effect of this exercise, I got very, very good at Choplifter. I spent a lot of hours playing that game, reproducing things, testing things. Yeah. One of the luxuries that I had doing this was that the game is really nicely designed and written in terms of gameplay tuning. So the other cool thing, again, the further evidence of how much effort he spent into making the game fun is that all of the tuning, like the gravity and how fast the chopper goes, how much your joystick accelerates, how fast the little men run, how many men there are in every house, how many houses there are, where the houses are, all that stuff is all sitting in global variables in one block in memory. So it's pretty clear that he had created this massive game tuning block, and he tuned all those numbers until the game was fun. You would expect a lot of that stuff would just be hard-coded everywhere. Like if you were writing it in an assembler, you would hard-code all that stuff, right? Because it would be a constant at the top of your assembler, which the assembler would then just replicate everywhere you used it. So in the disassembled code, it would be all hard-coded in 5,800 places. But because he did it all with some sort of primitive assembler that wasn't able to do those kind of macro replacements for him, he had actual runtime memory locations with all these tuning values in it. So that means then that you can reverse engineer the game by playing with those values. So if you know the game, near your starting base, there's a security fence. It looks kind of like power lines. And the enemies can't go past that fence. Well, the location of that fence is in these global variables. And so you can, start manipulating these global variables and you see, the fence moved. Okay, so I know those variables are the location of the fence. And now I can find everywhere those memory values are used, and that's fence rendering code probably, or fence checking code for the enemies and so on. So because Dan had done that gameplay tuning memory area, it just enabled all of this reverse engineering approach that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So yeah, you learn a lot about how he developed the game, and you get a bunch of tools for reversing it. So yeah, I think every game would probably be different in this regard. Like when I read the Load Runner reverse engineer, he had very different advantages and disadvantages as far as what helped him reverse engineer it. So yeah.
Excellent. Norbert in the comments says, I once reverse engineered Space War for the PDP-1, and it was a great experience. Yeah. And I think similarly constrained target.
Yeah. This was my only time ever doing this. I'd never done any significant reverse engineering before. So this was really, really cool to disassemble someone else's code. And because the whole thing was, if you like deduction puzzles, like if you like Sudokus or those gridless crossword puzzles, things that involve deduction puzzling, this was one massive deduction puzzle because you'd form a theory about what some memory location does or what some 0-page location does. You'd make a little note, and then you'd find 2 or 3 other hints somewhere else that are like, okay, this is something related to rendering, and this is related to the chopper's position. And then slowly the pieces fall into place, and then you get some confirmatory thing that's like, okay, this memory location is definitely that. And now everywhere in the game where that's used, you've now learned a little bit more about all those areas of the code. And so very slowly the pieces all fall together. And, every evening I'd sit down and spend a couple hours at it, and I'd learn 6 new things every time. Like it was kind of addictive because I'd always learn some. It's like, oh yeah, today I figured out where it chooses which animation frame of the little men to render. I found the little table where it chooses those or whatever. So it was always something, a little win every time you sat down. So it was a lot of fun for that reason. But I don't think I will do it again because it was also super exhausting and my brain was fried and I was seeing Choplifter routines in my sleep for weeks. Yeah, but I definitely recommend it if you're a fan of whatever platform you're a fan of. If you're a Commodore person, pick a big game on the platform and do this to it. If you want to become a better programmer on that platform, I mean, there's no better way. Like I learned so many Apple II programming tricks doing this that because sometimes you'd see a block of code and you're like, what on earth is this? And then when you get it reverse engineered and it clicks and you see what it's doing, it's like, oh my gosh, that's such a good way to do that, And so you learn all these tricks and techniques. So strong recommend. Cool. So that was my news item.
I like it.
Cool. Excellent. Yes, very, very awesome. Okay, yes. So getting back into the rhythm of this, we can move on to the next news item, which is Carrington's.
Oh, sure. I got a little short one. Just I think is a thing that people might find fun as something to do with your plotters. There's a person out there who uses fountain pens with plotters to make art. Never even occurred to me. I've seen people refill the ink things, seen people use different pens, Bic pens and plotters, but I've never encountered this before. This is a person who does plotting and makes art with fountain pens. And if you're interested in doing this, we'll go over all the details, there's a ton here, but if you're interested in doing this, here is a person who does it and has solved a bunch of the things, how to figure out what angle to put stuff on, and all the stuff you have to worry about. I think it's awesome and cool. They tested a whole bunch of different pens, different types of pens, different inks, and how to use them in plotters to get the best effects and least splotches and stuff. And then right down at the bottom will be a little video showing doing plotting with fountain pen. And it just... I really think it's neat. I've never seen anybody do this before. So if you have a plotter and you want to like branch out a little bit, you can get your angled fountain pens going. It talks about how to get them in properly so it's always the right amount of force on the ground or on the paper. And just like what a cool little thing to have done. So this person makes art with their fountain pens using a plotter, and I dig it.
That is incredible. This video that's playing on the screen, that is amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So I love that somebody does this. I think that's just it's neat. It just made me just thrilled to read this and to look at this and just look at some and talk about, okay, use this series and here's what you do and here's how to do the ink, because there's a bunch goes more than you think goes into getting this to not be a blotchy mess.
Yeah.
And it's just very cool. And they make really neat art. Like in the there's a place here where you can look at their, whereas I think they think they link to it. That was it. Anyway, there's a link somewhere where you can see if you want to look at their art. You can see example. Oh, here it is. You can look at the things they make, and some of them are really cool. Like they do some really neat looking things. Where I'm like, I'm really impressed with this stuff. And so just really digging the art that they're making using fountain pens and a plotter. And I just think it's awesome. So if it tickles your fancy, you got a plotter, you want to do something like this, somebody has solved a bunch of the problems, you should go look at this link and read all about it. It's cool.
That's neat. Going back to what we said earlier about the limitations defining the art. I mean, one could scarcely choose a more difficult method of creating art than making plotters understand fountain pens. But here we are, and the result is phenomenal.
So now I'm wondering, has somebody done the same thing with brushes? Have the plotter go over and dip the brush in the paint and come back and paint? Has anybody painted with a plotter? I don't know. So I might go look for that. So.
That's neat. Wow, good find. Jeez.
Yeah, just it tickled me because it's like, oh, I've always kind of liked plotters, but I've never seen somebody do this with them. So wanted to share. That's it. Easy peasy.
All right. And I don't have another one, but Quinn, you do.
Quinn does. I do. Quinn did another thing.
Yeah, I've had a busy few weeks since we recorded last, I guess. So yeah, after reversing Choplifter, I got all jazzed to write my own games again on the 8-bit side. I've been doing a lot of 16-bit stuff lately, but I got jazzed to do the 8-bit stuff again. And so I started a new Apple II 8-bit game. And the first thing I decided that I needed, or pretty quickly decided that I needed, was a Sprite creation tool for the 8-bit. I had written something similar for the GS, but not for the 8-bit. So what this does is it takes a PNG file that is a sprite sheet, a grid of sprites, and it generates binary patterns for the 7 sprite shifts that we talked about. So it's just a Python script, so you can run it on any platform. and it'll read your PNG file, and it'll generate hexadecimal data that you can dump into memory. And then when that data is copied to the graphics screen with the crazy Apple II format, it will look just like it did in the PNG file. And so it's not like a Sprite compiler. It's like an art pipeline tool. It generates data, not code, but it allows you to quickly get graphics up on the screen. So, back in the day, they would have used dedicated art packages like Mouse Paint or whatever to draw the graphics. But nowadays, we use any art program that you want, and it generates a PNG file. So this is kind of bridges the gap. So, and it can also generate either hexadecimal data to put on a disk image that you then load with your loader, or it can generate text data that you could paste into your source code. Because for this retro stuff, oftentimes it's just easier to put all your data directly in your source code and have the assembler, stick it in the binary for you. So that's what I tend to do. And if you do that option, then it will also generate jump tables for you for choosing all of the right sprite shifts for the pixel that you want to render on and so on. So it simplifies a lot of that type of thing. So I call it the graphics scientist, which is a joke I'm extremely proud of. And as far as I know, nobody has yet gotten.
Well, now that you tell me it's a joke, yeah.
So yes, one of the most famous art packages on the Apple II was, of course, the Graphics Magician, which was famously a vector graphics rendering tool and compression storage tool. So what is the opposite of magic? It is science, and raster pixel graphics are the opposite of vector graphics. So this is the graphics scientist. Now that I've explained the joke, it is no doubt even funnier. And that's all there is. So I wrote this as part of my current game effort, and I thought, well, this might be useful for someone else. So I put it out there, and a link to this will also be in the show notes.
Very cool. Yes. Now I just need to find an idea for like a fun game.
Yeah. Well, and one of the great things about having a tool like this is that it's then easy to rip graphics out of other games. So if you don't want to have to draw art for your video game, which most of us don't because we're programmers, in the GitHub, you can see a little demo running of a little running man, and that's the running man from Choplifter. So right. I stole that. I think it's actually the standard Broderbund running man. In fact, the Bungling Empire running man, which is also featured in Lode Runner and many other games. But so one of the things going back to the Choplifter topic, one of the things this program attempts to do is manage the high bit for you. So it gives you different strategies for managing the high bit. So in this example, the little running man is done in monochrome. So the high bit is handled as though you're rendering in 280 monochrome. But then the hello world example below is done as though interpreting the pixels as 140 resolution of full color. And it chooses a high bit for each byte that matches the PNG file as best it can. So anyway, it has a few tools like that to make life a little bit easier for crazy Apple II graphics. But so maybe somebody will find use in this tool. And that is my second news item.
Nice.
Excellent. Okay, and I think we have made it through the items of interest in news. Minute. And so now, a word from our sponsor. Excellent. Probably good that I didn't have news.
Yeah, sorry, I ate up the feed there with.
No, your item is so
super
awesome,
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like the biggest retro news of my life, so I had to go on a bit about it.
Yeah, 100%, totally worth it.
Okay, let's see. So I think at some point in recent history, we had this just sort of like suggested as we recorded as a gift idea. So I think I will. So that's where this came from. And I think I'm not going to be the one who's best able to describe it, though. But okay, anyway.
That never stops us.
Yes.
Exactly.
We regularly talk about things we're completely unqualified to.
Regularly, constantly.
And we're back. So the host retrocomputing gift idea this time is something that came up I think a time or two ago. These are kits by Ben Eater. So computer project kits. There are a couple of different kits that you can get here. The primary one that I guess I was thinking about here was the complete 8-bit breadboard computer kit bundle, which contains a number of different parts that assemble together into a sort of programmable computer built on a breadboard. But if you didn't want to make that, there's this alternative world's worst video card kit you can get. So either one. And if you get one of the kits, there are videos that kind of describe what's happening, why you're connecting these things, or you can just watch a Febreze ad. But yeah, so the most of the sort of documentation of what you do with these pieces that you get is contained in the YouTube videos, which I myself have not watched except to sort of scrub through, but it looks pretty interesting and also well described, like what is happening when you're building these things.
That's really cool. I didn't know about the VGA kit. That's neat.
Mm-hmm.
That's a useful thing for anyone who's interested in building their own homebrew computer, because that's the hard part.
It's the hard part. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. So this one I did kind of look through so maybe the gift idea is the VGA project kit after all, the world's worst video card kit.
I think the gift is the friends we made along the way.
I think so. Yes. But yeah, so he describes sort of like why the signal is the way it is based on CRTs and scanning guns, even though that's not something that you have to worry about in modern monitors. And ultimately he winds up putting together something that I think has an image of something, like a rose or something in ROM that will eventually get projected onto a VGA display. So in the end, is this the exciting conclusion? This is, it's a bird. So
that's really neat. Yeah, and of course the magic of Ben's kits is you're not just buying a homebrew computer piece of something kit. You're buying a whole lesson of YouTube videos that explain all of it and how it all works. And so it's a course as much as it is a kit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And they're not trivially cheap, but they're not really particularly expensive. I mean, the world's worst video card is $140, and the complete 8-bit breadboard computer kit is under just barely $300 at the moment. So
it's pretty reasonable, honestly. Like these
too.
TTL chips are getting pretty expensive, honestly, because they're not produced very much anymore. So yeah, that's actually pretty reasonable.
All right. Yes. So now, when we're finished buying our kits, we can turn our attention to eBay. Carrington has a lot of listings, but I see the theme.
So I am still fascinated by the whole arcade game turned into a board game. And there's a few we talked about before, and I found a couple others. And if you, like me, are interested in these things, I thought I'd display some others that are currently available on eBay, all of which are cheap, all of which are no doubt terrible. But I'm just fascinated by it. So did you like the game Defender? Yeah, you did. You want to play Defender, the board game, $24 on eBay. I have no idea. And the crazy thing is, so this is by Entex, which is also an arcade game maker. And so they, I guess, licensed the Williams game, and you can get yourself Defender, the board game, or the Milton Bradley version of Defender, the board game, a completely different game. So Milton Bradley also licensed the Defender name to make an arcade game. So I love that there are two Defender games out there, both of which
does
are
it seem to you
very cheap.
Does it seem to you like this is a game that would lend itself to playing on a board?
No, not at all. That's the thing. It's a terrible license for a board game.
But imagine you're a game maker. It's 1981. You're thinking, why is nobody playing games? They're all arcades. Boss, I just had a great idea. And they all got licensed. They're all terrible. And I love I swear, if I was a collector, I might only be collecting these things. And then I have to try to get friends who want to play board games, and it would be very difficult. So we're going to skip all that. But anyway, a couple of Defenders available. There's also a Popeye one, which I don't think we talked about before. I don't think I knew there was a Popeye board game, and it's also in English and French. So I think it's the Canadian version. This one's the Parker Brothers. They got into it as well. So you can play Popeye, the board game from '83. Pooyan. There's a Pooyan one. There's a sealed. I can't believe there's a Pooyan. It's a great arcade game, but there's a Pooyan board game. It's the most expensive one I found. It's $200. as a buy it now, but it's a sealed one. So if you really want to collect that Puyan and be the first person maybe in the world to play the Puyan board game, you could. I also found Turbo. I can't find other racing games. I would have thought there's other things that would get licensed as the brand instead of Turbo. Milton Bradley picked Turbo in 1983 to put out a racing game, which looks like a really straightforward board game. Looks really dull. It's just roll dice and move your character. I don't know how interesting it would be, how interesting any of these would be. Then there's Turtles. That is a much more obscure computer game, and so Entex made that Defender. Said, hey, we're making it into a Defender. Let's go and make Turtles the board game. Look at the back of this box. Empty. Box had nothing printed on the back of it. So much effort Entex was putting into these things delights me. Oh, $36. Paul, you've got to buy all of these. It's very important. And then if you're interested, I did finally find what seems to be a fairly complete list of 8-bit arcade games on Board Game Geek. So you can see games that were put into board game form. And Paul, you need to get all of these.
Yeah,
every single
very
one.
nice.
We will come to your house all the time.
I had the Pac-Man game. It was near the top of this list that you're scrolling. I actually had that one. That one right there, the Pac-Man Paradox games. Yep. So the game board had little punch outs all over it. It had the maze on it and had little punch outs, and there was a glass marble that sat in every single punch out. And then you had a Pac-Man character, which was a plastic Pac-Man that when you pushed down on him, it would scoop up the marble from underneath it, kind of like Hungry Hungry Hippos, sort of.
Oh, fun.
So when you moved your little Pac-Man around the table, you would push down and they would swallow up the marbles as you moved. So it was pretty gimmicky, and it was a terrible game. But I was so into arcade games at the time that I would buy anything that looked video game
This
related.
is why they all got licensed. I am fascinated about all of these things. We played a couple, but what was the one we played at?
We played the Load Runner one at K-Fest.
At K-Fest. That was not a good game.
And that was terrible. Yeah, they're always terrible, as you said. That's the funny thing about them. But
that's also the joy of them.
Yes, the Milton Bradley Defender that you showed looked very distinctively like a different game that they then slapped that license on. Because the Entex one actually looked like Defender. It looked like the arcade game, but this does. I mean, that does
this
not.
This looks like checkers.
Yeah, this is some sort of other grid-based board game that they decided to slap that IP on. Clearly, because that is totally not Defender looking at all. Amazing.
Anyway, all these things except for the new in-box Puyan are all very inexpensive, and it really does seem if you had an arcade, I would love to have a whole arcade. I would stick a board game version on top of each of the, you could use these just as display things. They're cheap enough to be a displayable object for people that like vintage things. So I dig them.
Yeah, I don't think you'd ever get any play out of them because the Venn diagram overlap of people who are board gamers and retro video gamers and willing to spend a couple hours of their life doing something terrible has a very small overlap.
But those of you out there that want a friend like that, this guy who comes and that is described by that, it's this guy.
Yes, we found that group at K-Fest, which is why it's the only time the Lode Runner board game has ever been played.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what I got. Whole bunch of board games based on 8-bit arcade games. We also play more in the future. Secret other ones. I'll bring them up in a couple months. I'll keep looking.
It's amazing how many of them there are. I had the Defender and the Turtles one. That was obscure. For anyone wondering, that's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's an older arcade game that was called Turtles that was based on, and that's
I think it was a Coleco game.
Yeah, it's a very obscure license. I assume the licenses were cheap. That's why they were buying them. But we also played.
Sure I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, I only know it from MAME. Never seen it in the arcade. We also played Fublitsky at K-Fest. Speaking of video game board games, I
actually like Fublitsky.
Yeah, that was fun. The Infocom combo board game, computer game.
Much more fun than when we played Cornerstone. Infocom's less fun game.
Yes,
database.
Yeah, the database. Yeah, that was less fun.
Much less fun game.
Yeah.
There was another video game board game that had been played at K-Fest. It was it based on Mule or something? There was a Mule board game.
Oh, there was. I heard a little bit of that.
It's like computer
or
something bandits, maybe, or
yeah, something like that. People were playing it in the lobby at one point. They had a 2C setup, and there was cards and some dice or something, but also the computer was controlling it. I didn't understand it, but it was similar to Fublitsky in that it was half board game and half computer game.
What is that called?
Half awesome.
Rascals? I forget. There's
Robot Rascals.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Robot Rascals. That might be it.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Yeah,
it looked neat.
There were a couple of these.
Yeah.
What was it? Chivalry was a board game.
Right. Yeah, I didn't actually know there was a board game associated with it. I only ever played the computer only version of it that went around. It was certainly something that was tried a lot. Like Avalon Hill, the paper wargaming company, made a whole bunch of those like computer Bismarck that we've talked about, like those kind of games where there's a board game element and then they try to make the computer do the boring math for you or whatever, which then just became video games. But there was a crossover period there where they tried to combine them.
All right. Let's see. Where are we? I guess I have a few things I could talk about. Let me resume sharing here. I have had to open some new tabs here.
More tabs. Yeah.
Yay.
More tabs.
Okay. I will not talk about all of the things that I got. Although last time I sort of I fell down on the job and had like 2 dumb things. So maybe to make up for that. But
Herb in the chat though talks about Star Saga, and hooray for Star Saga. We began playing a version of that game at K-Fest, and then I missed out, but I was super invested in that. I'm sad that I didn't get to play a whole.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was like a multi-year effort because it's such a long game, so people were playing it year over year at K-Fest. Yeah.
It has a lot of reading, as I recall. It's a lot of text. But, okay, well, yes. I mean, I guess I gave a couple of like a TRS-80 Model 1 set, which seemed
because we're doing the Trinity.
Pretty nice. Yeah, contains a lot of what is this thing? I don't know if maybe it's just a manual, but anyway, Model 1 with its monitor and some tapes and various bits it works. So if you were looking for something like this, it's not bad. It's priced at $450, which is probably at the top end of this. But if basically what you want is something you can display, then this is probably it.
What's fun is it's got ELIZA, and as like we were talking about, was there any software you could buy for the Model 1? And there is a commercial version of ELIZA.
There you go. Yep. Good point. Yeah, there's some commercial software in this photo.
Yeah.
It's also so the quote unquote monitor, the original monitor for the TRS-80 was actually just a television underneath that plastic cover. So it was like a Sanyo or an RCA television, and they just covered up the knobs with that plastic cover that says Radio Shack video display. So they just took the knobs off, and the stems of the original television controls are underneath that. I didn't know that until recently. A TRS-80 person told me that. So yeah, because they didn't want to spend money to develop a monitor. So it's literally a television set.
Sure. Makes sense.
Covered up the knobs.
So hilarious.
Such a Radio
so somewhere
Shack
in there, there's a place you can plug in the antenna too, probably in the back.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Okay, let's see what else. A Commodore PET 2001. This is
it's a cleaning.
It's seen better days,
Boy,
but
nothing says this eBay seller does not give a crap. Like this, holy moly! Take a cloth to it, man.
Yeah, how does a computer? How did they get that dirty? Like nothing I own has ever been that dirty.
That one always push down button on the cassette thing is also triggering me right now. I mean, like, There's another button and trip it. Oh wow! And
my car is cleaner than this. How do you let something get this dirty?
It does seem like they somehow brought this into the house to take a photo of it. It's like, I mean, yeah. Anyway, it's a very dirty pet, is what we're looking at here. And there's not much. Yeah, not much.
$1,500. Oh, does it come with a clean cloth?
So yeah, I mean, this is an example, I guess. I do think that these original ones. So they were called. I somehow didn't really retain this until recently, but the PET 2001 is what they called this first one.
Right.
So if you're looking for the model that has the terrible keyboard and the built-in data set or whatever,
which would make it the first collectible because it's oldest.
Yeah.
But this person clearly thinks this is worth $1,500, and they didn't spend 5 seconds wiping it with a cloth.
Yeah, not in this condition and not untested. It's not worth $1,500. But yeah, this is, I think, the more desirable pet now is the one with the weird orthogonal keyboard and the built-in tape deck.
Oh, this computer looks like it's been tested. It's gone through things. It's seen
Yeah,
some stuff.
it's seen some things.
Tested
Yeah,
like Job or whatever.
yeah, tested as a boat anchor maybe.
Right.
It's barnacles on it. Poor thing.
Okay, let's see. Is this still available? Yes, this is someone I guess just they had a bunch of Heathkit stuff. I'm not quite sure exactly what the story is, but so if you actually look at the listings by the seller, there's a whole lot of Heathkit things. Among the things that Heathkit had was this the hero robot, and this seller has a little sticker, actual Heathkit sticker that says "Warning: This area protected by a security robot," and has a picture of a little hero on it. Vintage
awesome.
Heathkit object. So if you are feeling
If I had one of
insecure
those
in your home,
robots, I 100% would want one of these things.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
A holy grail item for me is a hero robot kit, like unbuilt, because I would love to build one of those someday. It was always a dream of mine back in the day to get one of those kits and build it, but now they're unobtainium. They were very, very expensive at the time, and I imagine now they're unobtainium. But
I think we've talked about before. I had a couple of little kit computers when I was young that I always said were Heathkit things, because when I was a kid, I thought a Heathkit meant it was like the word for a computer assembly thing.
Right.
Like I didn't know it was
yeah.
like a brand. I thought it was just, I have a Heathkit. I did not have Heathkit things. I was just young and stupid. It's a Heathkit. That's what it means to have a thing you assemble. Any form of assembling electronics was a Heathkit.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got my ideas.
I actually briefly had my hands on the Hero Robot kit. I was in an after-school program for a while in junior high school, where the guy running it had one of these kits, and he was having students come over and help him build it. And I didn't understand at the time what it was. I didn't really appreciate it. It was just like a chance to play with a soldering iron, and so he would just tell us, solder these 2 wires to that thing or whatever. And it wasn't until later I realized, that was a Hero Robot we were building. It was that kit. And I didn't appreciate it at the time. And now I'm sad that I didn't get more out of that experience. When you're a teenager, sometimes you don't appreciate the things that you're being given.
Gosh, my life is just full of stuff I should have appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've not learned the lesson. I'm sure my life currently is full of things I am not actively appreciating enough.
The human condition.
Learn.
Yeah, we never appreciate what we have.
Right?
this time before the aliens invaded.
Exactly.
Okay, let's see. This, I don't know where this. Well, this is whatever. It's a new old stock 1963 Western Union desk fax transceiver thing. I don't think it's.
I'd want a pair of them.
Anyway, it's an old communications device. I think the thing that I thought was interesting about it was that there's a button on the front that says push this button only to acknowledge receipt of a message.
Only.
My comment
Only.
to this is push this button for no other reason.
Yeah, that button's getting pushed.
Yeah. I really don't know why I included that. Let's just move on. We talk a fair amount about these. Yeah. So what we're looking at is it's called an eye catch. And it's like a cover that you put on one of the circular mice that comes with the iMac G3.
Those puck mice. I don't think I've seen an eye catch before, but I 100% have seen the things that you put onto those to give them a more mouse shape.
Right, to make them not completely, like symmetrical from every angle.
Yeah.
So this is a tangerine one that just snaps, I think, on the top. You can get, I think I have a number of these, but
anyway,
do you
actually
whatever.
have some of those?
No, sorry. In my list, I do. I do not have any actual ones.
Time to start collecting.
Yep.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate the branding? So it's called the eye catch, and there's a cat on it because it's catching the mouse. It's holding the mouse
right
at the front of it.
Nice.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, it's a product that designs itself. I mean, come on.
There's a little review that's talking about them and shows all the different colors that you can get to sort of match your
that's so evocative of an era, right? Those colors, those lickable colors, whatever.
90s, 90s plastic.
Goodness. And then everything. I remember going into like a Best Buy or whatever, and like so many things were now translucent, colorful plastics. fridges and air conditioners and microwaves and like just everything. It just kicked off a whole thing. I don't think people realize how influential it was just in design. Forget computers. Crazy.
Yeah, in the same way that everything is now a solid white featureless monolith with blue LEDs on it. Back then it was all translucent, colorful plastic.
Yep. It was fun. Gotta say, mouse was terrible, but it was a fun time for design.
Yeah, but that mouse design did at least open up a new sort of market corner for people who wanted to fix that terrible mouse.
I wonder how expensive this was compared to just getting a mouse.
Well, it says $9.99 in this review from I don't know when, so not a very expensive little thing, but it's cheaply made too.
And then you get to keep your colors and still the Apple thing. Yeah, okay.
I mean, Apple has made their share of terrible design decisions, and it's always interesting how every time they do, this whole industry pops up to fix that problem. Which tells you how widespread
how many times
it is.
it's related to mice and buttons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mice. It's a real blind spot for Apple is mice. They have a long history of terrible mice.
All right. Let's see. What is this? Oh yeah. Okay. So this goes on a little bit of a journey, but so when I was looking for stuff, something that came up says 70s Bull Questar computer, and it's a terrible auction. It shows a couple of way too tight photos of something. It's a sort of a box. It says Bull on it in the back. It has some ports, and there are only those two photos. So it's really kind of like nothing.
And it's stacked on a bunch of other stuff. Like it's stacked on some old stereo equipment or something.
Right. What you see is what you get, except you don't get the other stuff that you see. So I said, all right, well, what is this? What is the Bull Questar? Okay, so Wikipedia tells me that it was a line of 3270 compatible terminal things by Group Bull and widely used in France. There was also the Bull Questar M, which is in fact Microl Series 80 Z80 based microcomputer. All right. Oh, and also actually there's a Bull Questar M in a French movie or whatever. So just sort of like following things around. Trying to find out about Group Bull and list of products, and they mentioned the Microl. So let's find the Microl.
All of this is new.
1973. Here's the Microl, and I discovered that the Microl is given. So we've heard of the Kenback One, right?
Yes.
Kenback One has some designation as the first something or other, which people fight about. The Computer History Museum currently says that the Microl, this 1973 thing, is one of the earliest commercial non-kit personal computers, and it actually gave it an award here somewhere. So like it was voted. Here we go. The Computer Museum report, fall 1986. They basically had something sort of like a contest, or like people would submit things, and they judged what was the first in a couple of various different categories. And the so where are we now? It's in this. Yeah, here we go. The early model personal computer contest. So if you actually read their discussion of this, they say they took submissions for various categories, and then they gave Kenback One. No, it's been too long since I've read this, but okay. So we awarded the first prize to the 1971 Kenback One, submitted by its creator as, what was the category? That's what I'm trying to find here.
First commercially available
qualified as
processor-based computer.
So qualified as the earliest personal computer known to the judges. The Microl that I was following here was awarded the prize as the first commercially available, as you just said, microprocessor-based computer. So they had judges, they had submissions, they had a debate, and they decided, the Computer History Museum, or the computer, whatever this is, the whatever organization this was. I think this is the Boston Computer History Museum before it moved. They awarded it to the Microl, and I'd never heard of the Microl. Basically, that was the sort of punchline of this. Is like, how is this? This had been judged to be like the earliest one. It's 1973. It's beat all of them. There's a the creator's name is unknown to me, and the computer itself is unknown to me. But D. Trong is the creator of the Microl. I think it lived mainly in France. But is this a computer you knew?
No, I've never heard of this. I mean, to be fair to us, France was a whole isolated island of technology for a long time. Like, they have their own world of weird things that none of us ever saw. Think like they had their whole teletext system and so on. So it doesn't shock me too much that a computer came out around that time that none of us have heard of. Yeah. But it's cool that these people dug it up and gave it the award, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's the thing that surprises me is that it was nevertheless, a sort of big deal computer history group that sort of like said this was it. This was the earliest one.
Well, we see earliest, but like I'm looking on the Wikipedia page, so it's the earliest commercial, non-kit, personal computer based on a microprocessor. I mean, that's a lot of qualifiers.
Yeah. As soon as that's what always happens when we try to call things first in computing. It's always got to have qualifiers because it's such a gradual shift from one thing to the next.
But 1973 is quite early. I mean, that's
is
4
very
years.
early.
A microprocessor-based
the Apple I
kit personal computer. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, based on this description, it's roughly a power equivalent to a TRS-80, but 4 years sooner. So that's not nothing. 4 years is a long time in home computing history. Like, this thing is way ahead of its time. Based on
looking at it, there's a ton of switches in the front, and it screams Altair type to me. And like young me was like, if it does not have a keyboard hook up to a monitor, it is not a computer.
Yeah, and I don't see any mention of an operating system. So is this just like a key panel in your own bootloader kind of situation like the Altair? Does it run something? I don't know. That's kind of it's definitely below that line that we were talking about earlier of functional, useful computer versus electronics toy. It's certainly, because it definitely looks like an Altair. It's got a front panel with switches on it. So
it screams S100 to me. I'm like,
and it's Intel 8008, so I don't know what operating systems could have been running on the 8008 at that time. Probably nothing commercial, so you'd be writing your own operating system.
Well, then we're in trouble, aren't we?
So the Association MO5 has one. Like, has recently acquired one. There's a story. I think if you go far enough back, it'll sort of talk about acquiring. These are obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it is in fact there are very few of these out there. And I think they tried to get one at one point, and then didn't work. And I think actually the Paul Allen Museum had one, and it's now unknown what happened to it because his heirs decided they're just going to shut it down. And so anyway, the mo5.com they sort of talking about what they've done with theirs, as they try to kind of reverse engineer it, document it, get it to do stuff. And there are some discussions of like programming it, and there's some YouTube videos of like making things happen. There are emulators being created. So it's kind of, in a sense, it's actually kind of an active area. This is I'm reading something that's from May 2023. So this is all ongoing basically. So
I bet you could emulate this on an Apple II.
Quite possibly. Yes.
Paging Michael Mann.
Yeah. But okay, so anyway, all of that is to say, you can get a 70s Bolt Questar computer for whatever it is if you want to emulate a 3270. So this was me trying to figure out what this
and so the auction ended.
Questar
did
was.
It sell, or did they just Stop trying.
That's a good question. It says it ended because it's no longer available. So I think that
They got an offer
means
offsite or
that,
something.
yeah, or they just gave up on it. I'm a little surprised by that because I thought I tracked this down. So let's just see if it got relisted. Questar, because I thought it was still available. Yeah, here. So maybe this is the second time that's happened. It looks unchanged. Still a terrible auction. Still the same price. Still the same terrible photos.
The seller is Music Outlet Shop. Sounds like a stereo equipment reseller or like a musical instrument reseller. I wonder how they got their hands on this. Probably an estate sale or something.
Yeah, cleaning out a building or something.
Yeah, strange beast. So Norbert in the comments says that this Bowl company was apparently influential, like in the earlier days of Big Iron. So their Gamma 3, he says, was the machine that forced IBM to rethink their punch card appliances and come up with the 1401. So there you go. They were apparently a competitor to IBM's early data processing and management stuff.
Yeah, that was my impression that it was actually a huge company. Just they didn't intersect a lot with like what was going on over here.
Yeah, this is not a company I had heard of, but yeah, I certainly don't know anything about the competitive punch card data processing market of the 50s and 60s or whenever that would have been.
All right. Anyway, yeah. So that was all I had. I got sort of down this Questar route and Microl route, but so I guess that means we have reached the point of closing discussions. And Carrington, have you any discussions to close with?
I think I got nothing. I'm looking around as if I'm going to see a thing. No, but I'm happy.
Okay,
I got
that's
that
good.
going for me. But no vintage computer or retro computer new things in my life at the moment. Still playing with the old things.
All right. For me, I guess. On my mind is the fact that Kansas Fest is coming soon. It's less than a month away, right? Yeah. And registration will close by the end of the week. But all of this is almost pointless to say, except we appreciate you, YouTube viewers. You are the only ones who are going to hear this in time for it to be relevant. So, but if you were going to go to Kansas Fest and you're watching the YouTube stream, register before the weekends, or else you will not be able to.
In its new location at the University of Illinois, right?
Yes, the University of Illinois Springfield in Springfield, Illinois. But anyway, so I've been kind of working on that. I'm not sure how much of this is going to make it into the audio version. Otherwise, yeah, no, I guess so Kansas Fest is coming up, and I have committed to doing a talk, which I have yet to prepare, and it is
Such
intended
of Kansas Fest talks.
Yeah. What's cool about this is that essentially I said I'm going to demo some hardware that's kind of cool, like the Apple Cat 2 modem specifically, the the big deal modem of the whatever 1200 baud, 300, 1200 baud era. But I am not quite sure where that modem is. I don't really know if it works. I'm not going to be home to be able to look for it for like another week. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that happens. It's going to be a little high stress moment when I see if the thing actually works, if it actually connects to another thing, and if I have anything to talk about at all. But it'll be fun, at least, if it mostly works, at least. So, but that's mainly what I'm doing, is kind of like thinking about what I'm going to say if it doesn't work or if I can't find it. So, Quinn, any closing notes?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I'm now working on a new 8-bit game. I've been stalled on that actually because of my shoulder injury. Annoyingly, one of the things I can't do is spend a lot of hours at the computer. But
because you saved that child.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yes,
yeah,
right.
Because I definitely saved that child whose name I don't remember. But yeah, that is plugging away. So progress has been quick on it, actually. It's kind of nice to go back to the 8-bit. Speaking of our talk about limitations defining art, the GS is fun to program for, but games, like, it's always a lot more work to make a GS game than it is to make an 8-bit game. The 8-bit games are just so much smaller and simpler and quicker to get going. So I've been having fun with that, learning and applying all of my new techniques from Choplifter. I've been borrowing a lot from the game.
What environment do you use?
So I'm using CA65 and Xcode and Virtual too. Yeah. So yeah, like the way that Choplifter manages draw lists for sprites, I really liked. So I've just copied that wholesale in my new game, and it's working really well. So I'm pleased with that. But yeah, it's coming along. Hopefully, I'll have something to show for that. And I'm thinking about. I'm going to be going to Virtual K-Fest, and I'm thinking about doing a talk about the Choplifter reverse. Chris Torrance is trying to talk me into doing that, and
that sounds great.
It's a good idea. I don't know if I have the energy to do it, but we'll see. I think the window might be closing on committing to that here. I don't know how much longer sessions are open for sign up, but yeah, I might do that if I can find the energy to make some slides and talk about it. But yeah, that's me.
Excellent.
Oh, sorry. Did I mention I got a C64 Ultimate 2 also? Because I think I mentioned a while back I didn't have any way to get disk images into my Commodore. So yeah, I did finally get. I got a decent. The product names keep changing because they keep expanding it. So it's the C64 Ultimate 2, I think is what it's called. It's sort of the FujiNet of the Commodore world. It does everything. It's Wi-Fi and it's networking and it's FTP and it's a disk image emulator, and it does printer emulation. It does everything. I don't even know what it all does. I just want to be able to run disk images. So then I was also bemoaning on previous episodes, where do you get like a nice collection of Commodore disk images? So Ian over in the Apple II Slack sent me a nice collection of good Commodore games. So there are a few closet Commodore people over in the Apple II Slack, and yeah. I don't want to out anybody, but we'll call him Ian. So yeah, he sent me an email with a bunch of disk images. So that was super nice. So I appreciate that. And sorry, legitimate distributed backups. And so I'm going to be playing with those hopefully soon. And yeah, that's it now for Commodore or retro stuff. I still don't know if my Commodore, I think, is unstable. I think it might have a bad RAM chip in it or something, because it's still, last few times I've tried it, it'll run for like 10 minutes and then it just crashes. So I don't think it's that all of the software is somehow this unstable. I think there's something wrong with the machine. So
I have a different opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's fair. Yeah, I'm just like, well, I was right. Commodores do suck all this time. The last 30 years of my life validated. But no, I think, yeah, I might have to get one of those diagnostic cartridges or something to just run some tests, because there's something flaky about it, but haven't been able to pin it down just yet. But yeah.
John in the chat says 1541 Ultimate really is the best add-on for the Commodore 64. Is that the one you have?
Yes. So yeah, 1541 Ultimate 2. I think that's the name of it. Yeah. Okay. It's the one, like, if you search for
final DocX, really final.
Exactly. Yeah. If you search for like Commodore disk emulator or whatever, it's the one you'll find. It's the one that like everybody has. I know about it from Rob O'Hara because it's the one he always talks about. So marketing works, because when I was like, I need a thing, and then I was like, oh, Rob O'Hara always talks about that thing, so I'll just go buy that. I didn't even research it. I just went and bought that thing. Because if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I just trust his whatever. It's Rob.
Yeah, exactly. He would know. So.
Yeah, I kind of want to get like, I have vague memories of Commodore games, played at my friend's house.
What is happening?
And at some point, I do want to sort of try those out again. Yeah. I have. So I'm sure I do have. I think I do have a 64 and a 128 somewhere. But the one I would like to really work with is the SX64, which is this little portable one.
Yeah, the SX64 is super cool. I like that thing a lot. And the screen, like, because the screen is so small, the graphics actually look better. Like these, low res screens look better when you shrink them down, because it makes the graphics look higher res than they are. Yeah,
it's actually really cool too, because it's color. I mean, like it's little, but it's color, so that somehow makes it even better.
It's so cool, that thing. Yeah. And John in the comments says I can download a test ROM image and put that on the 1541 Ultimate, and that will test my RAM. So that's a good trick. I'll definitely look for that. I didn't know there were diagnostic ROMs, so that's good to know. And actually related. So you mentioned some games. So that's part of what I wanted. Is I have vague memories of playing cool games at other people's houses that I want to try and find those games again, but a lot of them I don't know what they were. I just have a vague memory of there was this game where you had pliers and you were opening a box and you were dragging things around. Literally that game that was the description I had of it. And I went onto one of the Commodore forums. I think might have been Lemon or it might have been Atari Age. I'm not sure which one, and I posted that, and they have a whole forum that's identify this game. And you put in whatever you remember of it. And the Commodore experts will chime in and say, was it this? Was it this? Was it this? And they post screenshots. And within about 3 posts, they had figured it out. It was a game called Security Alert, which was about breaking into, it was like a heist game. And so you were breaking into alarm panels and stuff. And I remember just thinking that was the coolest game ever when I played it at my friend's house. So I want to try that game again and see if it's as cool as I remember. Some of the big ones, I really liked Paradroid. We played a lot of Paradroid at my friend's house. And so that one I remembered because everybody knows Paradroid. But there was some other obscure ones like that I'm like, what was that game? I don't know. So
I was just kind of amused at the idea of saying it's a game with the pliers and you have to specify, tell us more than pliers.
Yeah, no.
that doesn't narrow it down.
Yeah, but it was enough. People figured it out. Yeah, it was between 3 or 4 games. I knew it was some sort of a heisty kind of game, but it wasn't a big name one. It wasn't Mission Impossible, of course, because everybody knows that one. So once we eliminated the big ones, so they knew it was something obscure, something less popular, and they knew it was a heist game, and they knew so. Then they sent a couple of screenshots, and when I saw the screenshots, then it clicked. I'm like, yeah, that was it. I knew it was tile based. That was another clue. I knew it was like a 2D top down tile based kind of game where you're running around between different rooms in a building to disable alarms and stuff. That was enough for people. So it was a bit like those games that radio stations used to play, where they'd play the first 2 notes of a song, and then you had to call in and identify the song to win a prize. And people are freakishly able to do that. So it was a bit like that for retro gaming. So it was kind of fun. But yeah, it turns out Commodore people, pretty nice. Who knew? Pretty helpful.
Carrington is looking unimpressed.
Yeah, Carrington's like, I don't believe it. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah, no, they gave me this weird drink to drink, and now
keep it up
everything's
with the Commodore.
nice. Yeah.
They call it. Keep it up with the Commodore.
All right. It's possible that this should be wound down. But good review of 1977, among other things. Next time we'll come back with 1978.
And have nothing to say about it. Who knows anything about 1978? Nothing happened in 1978. Yeah. We were all just enjoying our candies and our pets and our apples.
All right. That's it for the show. You can find the show notes for this and all the RCR shows at rcrpodcast.com. You can find lo-fi episodes and more via Gopher at rcrpodcast.com. You can discuss the show in the forums, I think, at forum.vcfed.org/something. You can follow RCR on Mastodon. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/RCR podcast. Everybody's enjoying the dancing here. You can send feedback to feedback@rcrpodcast.com. I forget if I talked about this last time or sometime recently, but I couldn't find the Throwback Network anymore. So
I think it might be gone.
Yeah.
I think we're the only one who still talks about it.
It's just because we haven't updated our show notes. I mean, we also talk about, talking about us on the VC Fed forums, and I visit there once every year and a half. But I
those
need
were
to.
also gone.
Anyway, you can go on the Wayback Machine and look at what people said in the VC Fed forums. No, I think they're still there. In fact, I think I updated the address not too long ago, which made it much harder to read. Now that I have successfully disrupted all momentum, please write a review in iTunes if you want. And until next time, Retrocompute.
Compute.
Okay. Anyway, cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was actually pretty long.
Thanks to the 5 of you on YouTube who managed to show up every week somehow,
Yeah.
not knowing when we're going to record or if we'll record. I'm amazed anyone can find these live streams because
Yeah.
our schedule is
yeah,
completely random.
See the same people.
It says we're 16 people there, so
16. Wow.
very nice.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
All of you.
Yes.
I don't know how anybody
Next time.
finds this because we literally have no
Somehow
idea
we
when
found
we're
it.
going to record, and yet people
Yeah.
show up every time.
So thanks everyone, and now we will leave.